Today I effed up by getting into a car accident on Halloween. This was the first time in years that I have tried to come out of my shell, and it was a complete disaster. It was like something out of a TV show, and I still want to cry when I think about what happened only a couple of hours ago. For context, I'm 25 years old and a very introverted person. Ever since I was a kid, I've had awful social anxiety. When I feel uncomfortable in social situations, my hands sweat profusely, and I feel like I'm going to faint, and sometimes, I do. Therefore, it's been really hard to put myself out there and make friends in my 20s. I feel like I'm wasting what's supposed to be the best time of my life. All I do is stay home and rewatch my favorite shows. I have one close friend, but he moved away a few years back and now we're not as close. Anyway, I've been going to therapy recently, and my therapist has been encouraging me to attempt more socially. She has told me I should step out of my comfort zone and not be afraid to go places by myself. At first, going somewhere all on my own seemed impossible, but after we've been talking about it, she's convinced me it's for my own good. So when my coworker invited me to her Halloween party this past week, I thought of my therapist's advice and said yes. My coworker had always been nice to me, and she had invited everyone else in our small staff, so at least there would be some people I knew even if they weren't actually my friends. My coworker stressed that she wanted everyone in costume and that she would even have a costume contest with prizes. I decided to dress up like a zombie. I honestly had fun putting my costume together. I ripped up some old clothes, bought a bunch of fake blood and big scary teeth, and some zombie face paint. I worried about my costume being boring, so I decided to get something a little out of the box at the Halloween store. I bought a fake eye prosthetic that makes it seem like your eyeball is hanging out of your face. I thought it would be a hoot and maybe get some laughs, and it looked easy to put on. At first, I was proud of myself for accepting the invite, but when I woke up on the day of the party, I immediately threw up because I realized how nervous I felt about it. I spent the whole day thinking about backing out, but I was tired of being lonely all the time, and I was desperate for any way to meet new people. I put my costume on, gave myself one last pep talk before heading to the party. My coworker only lived about 15 minutes away and I wasn't drinking, so I decided to drive. But the closer I got to the party, the more anxious I felt, and the next thing I knew, my palms were getting clammy and I knew what came next. I only had a few seconds before I started feeling faint. I tried my best to pull over while I could, but it was no use. I was dizzy, and I accidentally rear-ended a small car in front of me and really caused some damage. I was already anxious and feeling faith when it happened, and I just sat in my car for a moment, trying to stabilize myself, when the other guy hopped out of his car looking angry. He was a huge guy, and he stormed over to me and knocked hard against my window. My vision was blurry, and his yell sounded a million miles away, but the next thing I knew, he was opening my door and pulling me out of my car by my shirt. He stood me up as I stumbled and started screaming at me for what I had done to his car. I started crying. I still felt so faint, but the fresh air woke me up a little. That's when I realized what a humiliating situation I was in. There I was fresh out of a car accident, getting yelled at by some guy, in full zombie makeup. People driving by were pointing and laughing as he called the cops, and I saw some people even take pictures from their cars. Some people screamed when they saw me, since I guess they might have thought my injuries were from the car accident. I tried to take my fake eye off at least, but the glue only dissolved with a special chemical. When the cop got there, he kept laughing while interviewing me, and I was stuck on the side of the road for almost an hour. I didn't go to the party, of course. I towed my car to the mechanic and went home and cried harder than I had in years. Every part of the day was ruined, and I feel scarred after seeing so many people pointing and laughing at me like that. I needed to tell my friend he was being excluded from our group. My friend invited everyone over for dinner last night and he was excited. He made homemade spaghetti and garlic bread and baked chocolate chip cookies for our entire group. There are 9 of us in the group, and for whatever reason they never invite him to hang out or do things with our group. Either I or another person will invite him, but most of the time he is on his own. I was going to his dinner, but I was going to be late since I had to pick up my dad from the airport. He asked everyone to come at 5 p.m., but I was not going to arrive until 6:30 to 7 p.m. I got to his house at 7 p.m. and he opened the door, but only one other person was there. They were sitting at his kitchen counter watching a baseball game and he had all the food on the counter. I asked him where everyone was and he said they either canceled last minute or had not shown up yet. We decided to wait another hour for people to arrive, but no one came and we ate in near silence. After we finished, he got up and cleared the table, and while he was in the kitchen I leaned over to the other person and said we needed to tell him that the group excludes him from events. She was hesitant at first because she did not want to hurt his feelings, but I countered by saying it was obvious that the people he considers friends do not feel the same about him, and she was convinced. We walked into the kitchen and asked him to sit down. He sat down and we told him that the other people canceled because they did not want to come. For reasons unbeknownst to us, they never asked him to hang out and he deserves a group of friends who will appreciate him. My friend told him that there is a separate group chat. He is not part of that, is considered the actual group chat. This took me by surprise because I was not aware of this group chat. She told him he is a good-looking guy with a bunch of interests and there is a ton of people out there who would enjoy hanging out with him. He was silent for a minute, then thanked us for telling him. He has been feeling ostracized from our group and admitted that he planned the dinner to see who would come. We were the only 2 who showed up and he appreciated us showing up and giving him a feeling of friendship. My friend and I said we want to continue being friends with him and he felt the same. We ended up talking for an hour and he sent us each of us home with a big bowl of spaghetti. The spaghetti was delicious and I even have enough for tomorrow. I checked Instagram tonight and he unfollowed everyone in the group but me and my friend. I am considering unfollowing them as well. The whole exclusion from the group chat thing is on my mind and I wonder what they have said about me. My friend is safe. We have known each other since our freshman year of college and she has never given me a reason to not trust her. I hope my friend finds a group of people for him. He is a very nice person and someone is going to want to spend time with him. What's the most effed up thing someone has told you about themselves after barely getting to know them? Guy walks into my bar, which is down the street from a hospital. He's pretty quiet, so I'm not trying to push for a conversation. Next thing I know, he breaks down crying at the bar. I go to ask if he's okay, if I need to call him a cab, etc. He told me his teenage son had just died in the hospital down the street about an hour earlier. I had no idea what to say or how to react. Girl at the gym told me she was in an unhappy marriage and never loved her husband, and as soon as the kids finished school she was leaving him. Pretty sure I didn't even know her name. This was a patient. Middle-aged guy in short-term nursing home for a hip replacement or something. I'm trying to get to know him to figure out what kind of skills he may need to work on in order to return home safely. I ask him, "Do you cook?" He responds, "I used to, but then the cops found out." Hitchhiking through New Zealand, I got picked up by a semi-driver. Awesome guy, but an hour into the drive started unloading every bit of personal information he could. How he's cheated on his wife, screwed the company out of money, stolen items. It was like I was a priest in a confession booth. When I asked him why he told me all of that, he said it's been eating him up inside for years and telling me helped get it off of his chest. He said I had no idea who he or anyone he knew was, so it felt like I was the perfect person to unload on. I'm in love with my young aunt. I'm a 19-year-old dude. My aunt is only 2 years older than me, so growing up I saw her more as a cousin. I haven't seen her for 6 years, until now. My family visited India this year and that's when I saw her again. She looked so beautiful. Long brown hair with this gorgeous tan, glowy skin. Big brown eyes with long eyelashes. When the wind blows her hair she looks like an angel. She also has one of the best bodies I've ever seen on a woman. I mean, she looks even better than the girl I've been dating since freshman year of high school. I think I'm in love with my cousin. She's one of the only people in my family who's actually nice to me. My cousin is also studying to become a doctor. She's such an intelligent young woman. Way better than my girlfriend, who prefers to spend her time eating junk food and playing video games. I love how my cousin actually wants to become something and is working hard to accomplish her goal. Something about how my cousin is and her personality and her way of being is just so mesmerizing to me. I love everything about her. I literally think I'm obsessed. While in India we went to a beach and she had this white bathing suit on that made her skin glimmer. I can go on forever about how beautiful my aunt is. My dad, her brother, is catching on to my obsession. He said he's noticing how I look and stare at her. He thinks something is up and I'm worried. He already spoke to my mom about his concerns and I'm worried she's going to make a big deal out of this. Even though I'm in love with my cousin, I don't think it's that disgusting. Maybe I'm disturbed. She's just so beautiful. My girlfriend of 3 years confessed she only started dating me because her roommate convinced her, knowing that I had a big crush on her. So I, 28 male, have had a mega crush on my girlfriend, 31 female, ever since school days. We were in the same school, although she was one class ahead of me. Now my crush was such that everyone in my school knew, like if I was anywhere near her people would just give a mischievous smile to the both of us. If we were sitting near each other then my friends would tease me mercilessly, lol. In short, it was impossible for her to not know about it, but I never had the courage to ask her out. After school we moved to different parts of the world for our education and we were not even friends on Facebook. Anyways, around 3.5 years ago I was attending the birthday celebrations of a friend when I saw her again. It was her alright, only she had become even more gorgeous and badass. The friend whose birthday I was attending was a mutual friend from our school, and he of course knew about my crush. There were 2 or 3 more mutual friends there who also knew and they kept encouraging me to go and talk to her. So I finally went up to her with my heart in mouth and had a small talk with her. She of course recognized me from school and we had a nice talk and then we exchanged numbers and socials. So, with great trepidation I did some light detective work to find out if she is single or not. To my great relief I didn't find the presence of any guys in her feed, so my hopes went up a little. I reached out to her to hang out fully expecting her to turn me down but she accepted, to my great surprise. So we hung out and I found out that we have a lot in common and then we decided for a next meetup. Things picked up from there and eventually we became boyfriend and girlfriend. She is everything I expected and more, plus she is also extremely happy with our relationship. We have even been discussing marriage. Anyways, last weekend we hosted her best friend and husband for a dinner at our house. The best friend is someone whom I had known during our school days and she is a good friend too. After dinner we were shooting the breeze, and everyone was pretty drunk except me, as they were staying the night at our place. So we were talking when her drunk best friend suddenly turned to my girlfriend and said, "Look how happy you are today. I feel some sense of pride after looking at you too." I smiled and said, "Well, thank you." Then she continued talking to my girlfriend and said, "You didn't even want to give this guy a chance and only agreed when I pestered you to go on a pity date with him and your plan was to let him down easy after the said date. But instead you guys are sitting here talking about your future together and it makes me so happy that I convinced you to take a chance with him. Can you imagine if you had stuck to your original plan?" Her husband by now realized the awkwardness and led her away to sleep. I could see in my girlfriend's face that she was visibly stressed. So we went to bed too and when she came to bed after changing clothes she was already in tears. She took my hand in hers and said please don't mind her words. I asked her is it true and she admitted yes it was. She knew I always had a massive crush on her so when I asked her out she didn't want to be mean by turning me down harshly. So she discussed it with her best friend who was also her roommate at the time about the situation. The best friend knew me so she tried to convince her to give me a chance but my girlfriend was not convinced. Finally the best friend asked her to go on 2 or 3 dates with me and then let me down easy, and my girlfriend agreed. But then she found out we really clicked together and wanted to continue dating, and well, here we are 3 years later. I hugged her and said it's okay, don't worry about it too much as it's water under the bridge. But as you guys can tell, it's obviously bothering me. And I think she has started to catch on too, as she has been extra attentive and loving to me since the incident. So Reddit, on the one hand I am the guy who is literally going to be engaged and eventually married to my crush, and it's even better because our relationship just how I imagined to be, only 10 times better. On the other hand, it does sting a little to know that she only agreed to go out with me because she pitied me, not gonna lie. Please knock some sense into me before I self-sabotage this wonderful relationship. Thank you. Update, so I guess I should tell what happened after I made the post. In the morning the best friend apologized for her insensitive comments the night before. She said she got too drunk and that she just wanted to take credit for setting us up and playing a matchmaker, but being drunk she blurted out some unnecessary things. I said of course, you don't have to apologize, as I have to thank her for me and my girlfriend going on that first date. After the best friend left I went to my girlfriend and shared my feelings, and asked her why was she hesitant on going out with me? She then took my hands in hers and told me that it just felt awkward to her. She had known for years that I had a crush on her, on top of that I was younger and junior than her. Her friends from back home sometimes used to tease her by taking my name, and almost all of our mutual friends know about my crush on her. So when I asked her out she felt awkward, because, 1. I was more into her than she was into me even before going out on a single date, and 2. I had her on a pedestal and she was certain that reality was never going to meet my fantasy, so she wanted to avoid going through this. Also she thought I was a weirdo, she admitted it, lol. But after her best friend went to bat for me she decided to go out with me and then let me down easy after 2 or 3 dates. Then I asked well what changed after the first date, and she said, well you didn't give off any weird vibes, yes you were very happy and nervous as a result, but I didn't get any creepy vibes from you. You were just a guy with a crush, with whom I had insane chemistry even on the first date. And now, 3 years later I think I have a bigger crush on you than you ever had on me. After having this conversation we went out to have dinner at the same restaurant where we had our first date and even tried to order the same dishes, but alas they had discontinued one of the dishes. Then we decided to order something entirely new, which we both had never had. Anyways, that was the update guys, thank you for reminding me how lucky I am, lol. Edit to add, we will be going ring shopping in the first week of December. I watched as my husband was dying as revenge. My, 27, husband Tim, 36, has a serious dairy allergy. I'm talking about an actual immune system reaction, not intolerance. His allergy is serious enough to cause acute enterocolitis, but he hasn't needed an EpiPen since he was a kid. I work full-time and also have some seasonal work this holiday season because Tim has been without work, and money has been very tight. As a result, I barely get to rest. The holidays are especially hard, and I found myself getting just 1 day off every 2 weeks for almost 2 months straight. As you can imagine, that day off means the universe to me. Now, Tim loves dairy, and will sometimes intentionally eat things which trigger his allergy. Lately, it's gotten out of hand, with him going from one risky meal every 4 to 6 months, to every 2 or so weeks. In fact, it always seemed to coincidentally line up with my time off, and I found myself spending my 1 day taking care of him. Last week, I finally asked him if he was intentionally timing it to line up with my day off. I fully expected him to say no, but he admitted that he was doing it to make sure that he'd have a nurse, and so he'd have someone close by in case he had an especially adverse reaction and needed a hospital. I was livid, and told him that he was selfish, robbing me of my rest. I said that if he made himself sick again, I wouldn't take care of him. I'm exhausted and I need to decompress. He didn't say much, so I thought he'd heard me. Fast forward to Friday night. I get home from work, and a few minutes in, Tim gets a pizza delivered. I ask him why, when I'm making dinner, and he shrugs. I ask if a large garlic Alfredo pizza is worth the pain, and remind him that I won't be giving up my rest day again. He smirks and eats an entire slice while grinning at me. I left it at that and went back to my dinner. Predictably, he got sick, profusely vomiting, retching and groaning from the intense cramping and diarrhea. I slept in the guest room to get away from the sound and smell. He called for me several times and I repeatedly told him no. Hours later, he was still sick and woke me up at the crack of dawn to go get him Pedialyte and meds because he was very dehydrated and still in pain. I told him to order it in and asked him to get out and let me sleep. He was still whimpering when I eventually got up to shower and eat. Again, I did nothing to help or comfort him. By evening, he was sulking, and by morning when I had to work, he was enraged. He yelled, and by the end of the day he told our friends and family that he nearly died and I neglected him. His family accused me of passively trying to unalive him. His mom called, shouting that he could have had a life-threatening reaction due to my petty actions, and that I'm a bad wife for not minding his health. I'm starting to feel guilty because she's right and he could have been seriously hurt.
Cops of Reddit, what's the most bull-sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and shit, and we get to the cops and they ask for our registration. I'm sitting in the passenger seat so I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot it was there and just froze. Wide-eyed, I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window and he's frozen too, just staring at the baggie with this look on his face like really? I just started immediately professing I swear to God this is catnip. You can take it and smell it or test it or whatever like I swear. And at this point it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up, and the cop takes it and reasonably deduces I'm telling the truth. And he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way.
What is your best joke? It's kind of a long one but a good one. One day, St. Peter was manning his station at the pearly gates of heaven, denying or allowing people to enter heaven. Eventually, a guy comes up and starts talking to Peter, and Peter says, "Tell me about the day you died." The guy says, "Man, it was terrible. I got off work early to try and catch my wife cheating on me, as I'd expected she was. Well, I got home to my 14th floor apartment and found my wife naked, wet, and in bed. Obviously, she had just been having sex. So I searched all over my 14th floor apartment and couldn't find anyone, so I decided to have a cigarette on my balcony. Lo and behold, I looked down and saw a naked man hanging by his fingertips, and in a rage, I grabbed a hammer and smashed his fingers. Lucky for him, he landed in some bushes and started to scramble out of them. So I went and pushed my fridge off the edge. It landed on him and killed him. But the act gave me a heart attack, and I died." Peter let the man in and asked the next guy, "Tell me about the day you died." The second man said, "Man, it was awful. I was in my 15th floor apartment doing acrobatics, but see, I have a better range of motion if I'm naked when I do my acrobatics, but I misjudged a jump and fell out my window and off my balcony. Luckily, I caught myself with just my fingertips on the 14th floor apartment balcony, but then some crazy bastard came out and smashed my fingers with a hammer. I managed to land in some bushes, but as I was trying to get out of the bushes, the mad lad dropped a fridge on me, and I died." Peter chuckles to himself and allows the man entry. Then Peter turns to the next man and says, "Tell me about the day you died." The third man says, "Okay, so get this, I'm hiding in a fridge. What is the most wild thing you have ever seen your mother do?" "My mother is an army veteran, martial artist, domestic abuse survivor, outdoorswoman, long-time single mother, an artist with a college degree and, according to local legend, a bloodthirsty monster. My hometown is tiny and I was attending school there. I was nerdy, unathletic, hopelessly geeky, a teacher's pet, had my V card, got rejected by my crush 6 times and built like Susan Boyle. I was doomed. I had learned fighting back at bullies wasn't a good option much of the time. I'd still catch hell, and they'd just come back for more because they were stupid. One big dude named Robert was a piece of work. An 8th grader, he was 6'2", well north of 200 pounds, and had been held back twice. He ran with a trio of dweebs that had been giving me grief for a couple of years. I remember once he got in my face and tried to goad me into a fight. Told me stuff like, "You're a mama's boy and your mom's a woman I'd love to get down and dirty with in the hopes I'd swing." I didn't know how to, really. He got ratted out by a passing teacher, and we sat in the principal's office where he was told to cool his jets. Most days, I rode the bus home. On our fateful day, my mother came to pick me up from school. For whatever reason, my younger brother wasn't with us, so it was just me and my mother. We were walking past the big yellow school buses, all lined up side to side, ready to roll out, and then Robert's ugly mug emerges from a window, and sees me. I heard the exchange in the window. Robert had labeled me as "Sir Smells a Lot" because I forgot to wear deodorant once. Robert belts out with, "Hey, Sir Smells a Lot." I told him to shut up. My mother's head swiveled, and she got that voice that commands instant obedience if you value your hide intact. "Who said that?" I pointed in the direction of that smirking mug, and he was, God bless his poor heart, too stupid to realize the danger he was in. He said it again, head hanging out the window where anyone could get to it. My mother is 5'4", but never bothered to let that stop her from anything. In a flash, she was at the side of the bus, and in one motion, had vaulted up on the bus's tire and grabbed the open windowsill to brace herself. With her free hand, she was snatching at Robert's pumpkin head. That 6'2" stack of poop, acne, and hormones flattened Ricky in his quest to escape certain death. He barreled over his compatriot, all thoughts of chivalry lost, scrambling to the other side of the bus, squealing for the bus driver to save him. My mother kept reaching in the window, trying to snatch his fool head off, screaming, "Let me at him. You're so tough, ha, you tubby bag of jelly." In the aftermath, my mother turned herself into the school principal and begged for mercy, which she received. Ex-wife and I slept together. Hey guys, long post but the details are important. My ex, 47 female, and I, 45 male, have been divorced for 3 years and have 2 sons, Wyatt and Jack. Our split was mainly due to our kids and the different parenting styles. My ex is a genius. She's a PhD and a research scientist, while I'm an analyst. She grew up with colder parents who instilled strict routine and discipline to be successful, while I grew up with a very close relationship to my parents who encouraged forming my own path in life. These two backgrounds came head to head when it came to our own kids, especially when they started school. My ex wanted them completely focused on academics, while I wanted them to live a little and let them enjoy being kids and have them figure things out on their own a little. After months of fighting, we decided that it wasn't going to work. Our split was amicable and she actually paid way more child support than she had to, but insisted on it. We even spend Christmas and birthdays all together for the sake of our kids. Our sons primarily live with me by their own choice, and while my ex does see them about once a week, my kids are teenagers now and sometimes they want the weekends to themselves. My older one, Wyatt, has said to me that sometimes he feels like it's my ex's own fault, because of how hard she was on them. I try to remind them that she's still their mother and she was doing what she believed was best, and at the very least, he owes her respect. This This brings us to a few days ago. Since both kids are on break, my ex tries to stop by on the weekdays to try and see them more. She stopped by, but both kids were out with friends for the evening. She had come all the way, so I invited her in for a drink. We were just chatting, and eventually we started looking at old baby photos of our kids. We had a lot of laughs until we got to one picture. It was a picture of when my sons were 6 and 2, and I had them both up on each shoulder, and the three of us were laughing. My ex just started sobbing out of nowhere and started apologizing to me for everything. I was really confused, but I hugged her and told her that she only did what she thought was best and that she shouldn't apologize for trying to be an involved parent. We stayed there for a while, but neither of us wanted to let go. Eventually, she looked up at me, and her look reminded me of when we were dating. We started kissing and things escalated. It was like the 12 years of our marriage came flooding back. And during, my ex kept tearing up and telling me she loved me. She quickly left before our kids could come back, and we'd been silent until today. I got a text from my ex asking if we could meet up alone to talk. What the fuck do I do here, guys? On one end, both my ex and I still care each other. But on the other, this whole thing could be a huge shock to not only our kids, but the rest of our families as well. Update. Hi, everyone. I know it's been a little bit, but I have an update to my last post. First of all, thank you to everyone. Your guys gave some great advice and really helped me prepare for the conversation with my ex. I met up with my ex. I went over to her apartment, and we had a great talk. About a year after the divorce, my ex actually went to see a therapist to sort of get an understanding of where her life was. As she kept going and discussing things from her childhood, she realized she was doing the same things to our kids that her parents did to her. Things that ultimately made her resent her parents, which was why she was actually closer to my mom than her own. She teared up a bit and told me she never stopped loving me, and that regardless of what a document says, I would always be her husband. My ex admitted that on the night the incident happened, she knew the boys would be out and she wanted to spend some time with me alone. When we started looking at old pictures, she got overwhelmed. She told me how much she missed me and would do anything it took to make it up and at the very least, be partners again. I told her that I always cared about her and that I missed her, too, and that I still felt something for her. At the end of the evening, we both came to terms that we still loved each other and would give it another shot. The terms were that we take it slow and regularly attend couple counseling, as well as to not to tell the kids yet. Since then, we have been spending almost every day together, and we actually had our first counseling session. It went pretty well, even after everything that happened in. My ex and I were really able to establish the grounds of our new, old relationship. We are going to be going to more sessions, but it's a good start. I actually hosted a family dinner a couple nights ago, while our boys still don't know about us. I made the excuse that it would be good for the four of us to have a meal together, and honestly, my wife really has changed. She was more open with the kids and was more interested in hearing about things, like sports, hanging out with friends and hobbies. My kids responded really well, and for the first time in a while, our sons were enthusiastically engaging and connecting with their mom. She also planned a trip to the zoo for the four of us like we used to do when the boys were young. I think my older one got a little suspicious and rolled with it, but the fact that we have co-parented so well has been a great cover. Things are good now, and I think deep down neither of us truly fell out of love, and I think we would have eventually found our way back to each other regardless of what happened that night. Thank you guys again for all your kind words and support. I found my cousin and girlfriend having intimacy on my bed. 3 years later, they got married and I gave them a gift that they will never forget. I once looked up to my cousin. I thought he was a great guy, and we were close like brothers. I was also dating a girl. I was deeply in love with her and planned to marry her someday, so I thought my life was perfect. One day, I came home early because a colleague offered to cover my shift. I was pretty tired, so I accepted and went home. Arriving home, I found them in my bed, having intimacy. Both of them were shocked to say the least. I told them I wanted them to be gone by the time I got back and left the house. They were gone by the time I did get back, but she left me a note telling me she was sorry and to call her when I'd calmed down. I didn't call her. I texted her saying that I'd gather her things and drop them off at cousin's in a few days and that she's staying with him now, not me. I followed through with that. It took about a week to transfer everything. Both of them tried to apologize, but I didn't have anything nice to say to them, so I said nothing. I just knocked on the door and handed the bags to whoever answered before leaving. My cousin called me multiple times to try to apologize, but I refused to accept it. 3 years have passed since then. I had no contact with them. I didn't bring it up to the rest of my family or any of their friends. I'm not sure why. I just didn't. Then last month, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, so I answered. It was my cousin. He sounded really happy and was acting like he hadn't destroyed my life. He explained he and my ex were getting married and that he wanted me to be his best man. I was so angry that he had the utter gall to act like nothing was wrong and lost my temper. I yelled at him and called him names before hanging up. He sent me a text telling me the offer still stood and if I didn't want to be his best man then he just simply wouldn't have one. A few days passed by. And I had an idea. I texted him back and apologized. I sent a paragraph of bullshit saying I was still angry but this could be an opportunity for the three of us to heal and move past it. He was overjoyed and said he'd pay for everything and he'd help me pick out a suit if I wanted, which I accepted because I sure as poop wasn't going to spend any money on his wedding if I could help it. The wedding day came. I had spent the week prior writing a speech, putting all the negative feelings that had bottled up over the years into words on paper. The wedding was pretty good. I'm sure one of them has some nice well-paying job or something because they must have spent a decent bit of money on this wedding from how nice it was. Our entire family was there, as was a decent chunk of my ex's family. Eventually, the time for my speech came. I just remember feeling really nervous as it built up to it and my voice kept faltering when I was reading it out, but I didn't and still don't care. I sounded like I was going to cry and tripped over my words, but I managed to read it all out. I said, "Hello everyone. I'm not very good at public speaking, so apologies in advance. It's an honor to be at this wedding, and an even greater honor to be the best man." I was shocked that I was even invited at all since the last time I'd spoken to the bride and groom was when I'd found them effing in my own bed. She was my partner at the time, you see, but I don't think she got the memo that when you're dating someone you don't F their cousin in your partner's own bed. And it wasn't like he didn't know we were dating either. Who knows how long this slimy a-hole was effing her behind my back? Weeks? Months? For those unaware, she and I had been dating for 2 years. I loved her with all my heart and was actually saving up to get a proposal ring. Maybe if she wasn't such a WHRE, he would be giving this speech instead and I wouldn't have been struggling with mental health for 3 years. Anyway, I've heard 50% of marriages end in divorce. I hope yours is a messy one. From the bottom of my heart, F you both. You ruined my life, and I will never forgive either of you. Then I left. I was expecting some kind of dramatic moment from all the guests, gasps of shock and all that, but there was none of that. Everyone was silent. On my way home, I got a call from my mother angrily telling me that I'd ruined the wedding and both of them were so upset and she asked me why I'd do this. I told her that they deserved it for what they'd done to me and everything I'd said in the speech was true. She kept defending them so I swore at her and hung up. Since then I've gotten several calls and angry texts from others in my and my ex's family that I ruined the wedding. I've also received a few texts from people who were there being supportive and telling me they were there if I needed to talk. I'm not sure if I feel better having done this, but it did bring me great catharsis when people were telling me the wedding was ruined. At least now they've felt at least a fraction of what they've made me feel. I told my aunt her cat looked like a sweaty ballsack. My mom and I were visiting my uncle and his family yesterday. My aunt just got a baby Sphinx cat. It is pink, hairless, and wrinkled. It is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. No cat should ever be without hair. She was going on and on about how beautiful it was. I will be clear, it is a very cute kitten. I however think that expensive pets are a waste and that she could have adopted a rescue. Matter of fact, she could have gotten anything. I mean anything. I don't know cat breeds, but she could have gotten an orange cart, a gray cat, a white cat, a goddamn blue cat. I don't know. I just cannot stand those stupid Sphinx cats. When we were having dinner she was sitting with the kitten in her lap still going on about it. My uncle was rolling his eyes and my cousins were obviously getting tired of this as well. Thank God I wasn't the only one who was tired of this bee's nonsense. When she asked me for the 10th time how cute I thought it was, I told her it kind of looked like a sweaty ballsack. Like this thing is effing atrocious to look at. It is despicable to gaze upon. It is disgraceful to think about. It is detestable to imagine. It is diabolical to glance at. It is abominable. It is deplorable. If this cat was a human, it would be moderating Discord servers. This cat looks like a scrotum that has been left in the sun to suffer. This cat is foul, and I want nothing to do with it. My uncle laughed so hard he spit food all over the table. My one cousin also laughed, but his little sister kept asking what a scrotum was. My aunt became furious at me and yelled at me for how disrespectful I was being. The cat itself even scratched me as she yelled at me. Little demon. At home my mom told me I was an a-hole for using that word at the dinner table. I stand by my comparison.
My delusional sister is demanding that I let her walk down the aisle at my wedding so she could feel like a bride. Now, she's saying she will back out of my wedding and I won't let her. I'm getting married to the love of my life in a few months. We both decided to wait until we were well off to be married, so we could have our once-in-a-lifetime magical moment. However, my sister Stacy got married at 19. They were together for 5 months before he proposed. Their wedding was rushed and half our family couldn't even make it because of how soon it was planned and set up. It was small, and just in a courtroom. No dress, party, just a legal wedding. However, my wedding is around $19K, and we haven't even finished everything. It took us ages to set everything up and save. But Stacy recently came up to me while coming over and asked if she could walk down my aisle and meet her husband, so she could feel like a bride. I laughed and asked if she was serious and she was. She claims she never got her magic moment, and just wants to feel special once. But it's my wedding and my special day, she had hers. Stacy claims it will only be between us, and it wouldn't take away from me, but then I asked what she might wear and she showed me pictures on her phone of wedding dresses. Hard no for me. She then asked again yesterday in front of my fiancé, and I think it was an attempt to pressure me. He laughed and said no, thinking it was a joke, like I did the first time. My mother and Stacy's husband say I'm being an asshole because Stacy still isn't rich, so she can't afford another wedding even if she wanted one, but neither are me and my future husband. We just planned for years. I just wanted one day for myself, but maybe I'm blowing it up because she never got the bridal experience. Update yesterday, we met up for brunch. I told her as much as I love her, I've waited years for this day, and it was mine. She had hers, and if she truly wanted she could have used the money I gifted her to get her own wedding. Her husband cut me off and said that they needed the money for rent, but she didn't let him talk. She started crying and asked her husband and my fiancé to step out for a few minutes. They both did, and she told me her husband and our mom had been the ones pressuring her since she had admittedly been jealous, and told them both she wished she could have a larger scale wedding. She said she had been over the whole thing until her husband started saying it wasn't fair because he was jealous he couldn't provide for her, and eventually complained enough she asked to walk down the aisle for him. Stacy said she was willing to fully back out of the wedding and would understand given the heartache she's given me, but I told her that her husband would be the one without an invite, which she gratefully agreed to. We talked more in depth about why she was jealous, and she said she regretted being married so early just so our father could be at her wedding. After a few more minutes and both of us crying and forgiving one another, my fiancé and her husband came back in. I told Stacy's husband he was uninvited, right then and there, and he seemed to understand why immediately. I decided to let my sister wear a dark silver or pale gold dress, to match my theme, and walk with me down the aisle, as my father sadly can't. She told me I didn't need to, but I insisted.
My neglectful family hated me for years because I am an accident child. So I blew up at them and gave them a realization. When I was born, my 5 siblings were 16 to 23 and my parents were both 46. My parents didn't really think that they would get pregnant again, but here we are. I was never really looked after by anyone and no one ever really spent any time with me, played with me or anything when I was a kid. My siblings would often say, "Leave me alone, I don't like you," or "Stop bothering me." They didn't ever buy anything significant for me, just handed me down clothes and things from my siblings. I've always felt that they resented me, but I am too young to know why. I was confused, but I could not tell anyone in my family because I feel like they all bonded together and would just talk behind my back if I told them what I feel. I realized this as I got older, so I focused on myself. My thought process at the time was that there was something wrong with me because my siblings were loved by my parents, so if I improved myself and did things for them, maybe then they would accept me and love me. I always got the best grades in school. My father was a football enthusiast and played in high school, but I was a basketball lover. I dropped it and took up football just to make him proud. But my siblings or parents never even bothered to show up for a single game. I made sure I did all my chores readily, and always kept my room clean, but nothing I did was ever enough for them. For example, if I was first in class, my parents would ask me why I didn't get a higher score. They ignored the percentile but focused on the percentage and things like that. I was never appreciated for what I was, only detested me for what I wasn't. I always envy their laughter inside the house, inside jokes, and story sharing because I do not belong. Always. I feel like a complete stranger in my own family. This brings us to yesterday. We celebrated my father's birthday. My siblings do not live with us anymore and my mother had to leave early and would not return until later in the evening, so it was just me and him for the day. I am excited because I get to be with my father alone. Maybe there won't be awkwardness between us if other family members are not in the house. I will get to give him my present first. I decided to serve him breakfast in his bed just as he woke up and bought him a tie for a present. I know it was not the best present, but I was on a budget, nothing too extravagant because I wanted to save as much money as possible for college, but it was definitely a smart one. I also cooked lunch for us and took care of all the chores. I went to him sitting on the sofa and was fidgeting my fingers in nervousness. I told him, "Happy birthday," the most he could come up with was a pathetic, "Thank you," and it was clear he wanted me to leave him alone, so I did just that. I felt so lonely. Then my mother and siblings came. We all went out to dinner and the way these would go is that they would all have a good time and I would just sit in the corner. This is the case with almost all family dinners we have ever attended. We went back home and I don't know why, I really don't know what triggered it, but for some reason, I just started crying all of a sudden. Maybe it was them being so happy together. I don't know. When they asked me what happened, I just blew up at them and told them how I felt about my entire childhood, how they never showed me any kind of love and affection among other things. I don't know exactly what I said, but I do remember I ended it by saying that I wished that they had terminated me if they hated me so much, or could have given me up for adoption so they could all live their lives without me. My eldest sister started to say something, but I just ran up to my room, closed the door, and went to sleep listening to some Hans Zimmer because they just kept knocking at the door. Early this morning, I went out my window and went to a secluded spot that I often go to, usually to play some guitar or just pace around listening to music or just enjoy the sound of nature. Then I decided to go home to face the family, and I arrived home to quite a melancholic environment. As soon as I arrived, the first thing they all did was hug me, which honestly surprised me. This was probably the first time in years they were showing me any kind of affection. They had prepared some food for me and after I ate, we all had a talk. They all first of all apologized for the way they treated me. They confirmed that I was an accident and none of them wanted to deal with another baby and I basically messed up their life plans. They didn't word it this way. They didn't really want to do anything with me, so they just started ignoring me because I never seemed to need anything from them. They reasoned that I was always doing great in life. I always did my chores on time, kept my things neat and clean as a kid, always got good grades, and never complained about anything. They just assumed that I never required or wanted anything from them. So they were able to just keep ignoring me and pretend as if I wasn't there basically. I said that this didn't justify their behavior. I just made it easy for them to ignore me. They all asked me to forgive them for alienating me and they said that they would do their best from now on to make me feel as if I was a part of the family. They then wanted to go out and celebrate my birthday, but I was just mentally and physically exhausted.
Who is the dumbest person you have ever met? My patient had fried chicken skin stuck on his shirt and told me he didn't know how it got there since he bought it brand new. When I saw him in the waiting room, he was drinking a Monster, had matted hair, and everyone sat away from him. When he came up to me and I got a whiff of him, I had to plug my nose. He rattled everything he walked by. That's when I started fearing for this guy. How does anyone live like this? I needed to help him see what he couldn't, so I was gonna give him the best care I could free of judgment. It was clear he needed to not only lose weight but needed a complete lifestyle change. His unawareness to his obesity must be due to not being diagnosed with something. It's possible he suddenly gained weight without realizing it because of insulin resistance, diabetes, or some predisposed obesity genes. However, when I ran all the usual tests, I found that he showed no symptoms of any medical conditions. I was stumped. I knew something was wrong, and that my patient was withholding information from me. I was going to get down to the bottom of his problems, so I asked about his eating habits, and they were weird to say the least, because he didn't eat much during the day and his appetite was much like that of a healthy person. So what was his problem? His nighttime cravings were absolutely absurd. He DoorDashed the Wingstop bundles and as many McChickens as he could eat nearly every night. I figured that he didn't tell me this information sooner because he was too embarrassed to share. But if there's one person you should never lie to, it's your doctor, because they always know how serious a problem is. And my patient had no clue just how serious nighttime snacking is. Nighttime snacking seems so simple, but it can induce depression, heart problems, high blood pressure, and the possibility of cancers and gallbladder disease. Your body needs to naturally consume as many calories before bed. I told my patient that we needed to tackle his absurd appetite. When I took a better look at them, the matted hair, the eye bags, the acne, the odors, I'm no psychiatrist, but I'm almost sure that they were going through the fullest extent of their depression because of their nighttime appetite. I recommended that we start taking preventive measures and reintroduce new eating habits. As a precaution, I asked him if he was allergic to anything, and he said he was allergic to water. I was a bit confused, so I asked him what kind of reaction happens when he drinks water. He looked me dead in the eyes and said it made him pee. Unfortunately, that is a feature of the human body, not a bug. I didn't think I would ever have to explain that to a person. Anyway, I recommended black coffee before bed and heavily suggested water as well to kill his appetite because something told me he wasn't drinking any water. I told him that if the coffee didn't work, I'd look for something else. Somehow, my patient came back 3 weeks later 15 pounds heavier. He said he couldn't get past the bitter taste of black coffee and he was constantly craving 40-piece chicken nuggets, so he gave up and went back to his old habits. Luckily for him, during that month period I had found night food cookies, which were completely healthy to eat at night. I was testing its effectiveness because they're low in calories and are meant to be eaten past midnight, unlike other junk foods. I ate them every night and didn't see any changes in my weight or feel any unhealthy, and I was getting better sleep whenever I ate them. So, I had just the thing for my patient, and recommended the night food cookies with complete confidence. He was happy that there was an alternative to his unhealthy habit because he didn't think he would ever quit. 3 months later, he came back for his appointment and there were so many noticeable differences in him. He said that the cookies helped regulate his sleep, so he always woke up ready for the day. He told me that little by little, he was feeling better every day instead of waking up depressed. So, he was motivated to work out and start taking care of himself. He went to the gym 3 times a week, and since he wasn't binge eating so much because of the night food cookies, he started eating in a caloric deficit. He also shaved his matted hair off, and he said he felt so much relief when he took that load off of his head. And he was eating more healthier foods than just the night food cookies, so his acne was clearing up. Not to mention, he didn't smell bad, which meant he finally got the energy to shower regularly. It was nice seeing him be put together. Though, the best part came when he stepped onto the scale and he had dropped 20 pounds. With his weight, you could barely tell, but it was impressive and such a huge accomplishment for him. He was proud that he was finally losing the weight and was happy he didn't have to get rid of his nighttime snacking. I could instantly see he was on the path of rebuilding himself. So from then on, I always recommend night food cookies to people who struggle with nighttime binge eating. It's patients like these that remind me how much I love my job, even if they lack common sense.
Life as he knows it will soon be over. The prick is messing with a 14-year-old child. How can a little girl message me on Instagram talking about he's mine and I think you should just give up? Now I don't know exactly whose baby this is, but my God, I believed her. Something in my soul knew she wasn't lying. I sensed he was possibly cheating on his work trips. So I spent a lot of time going through his phone. I don't give a shit about his right to privacy, so please spare me your sanctimonious judgment, but I knew something was funky, but I never knew that he had a third one he kept hidden in his car. I spent almost 2 weeks compiling evidence and preparing to leave him. I can't believe the shit I have found. All the texts and nudes he and that baby have been sending each other. Found his secret Instagram account and documented all that shit. I mean, I got all the evidence. I just can't believe what he has been doing. I just never saw him as a nonce. It just wasn't on my bingo card. Then boom, this kid messages me saying how I don't deserve him. How I have trapped him in this loveless, abusive marriage, like I can beat his gigantic self, and that the only reason he's not left is cause I keep threatening him with suicide. The man is an absolute liar. He has this poor kid completely brainwashed. She thinks she's in love. That poor baby is turned inside out by this sick fuck. Tonight is the night. I got all the evidence I could ever need. I've finally got enough information on who this baby is and who her parents are. As soon as he leaves for his flight tomorrow, I will be sending a copy of everything to her parents and reporting it to the police before I make my own escape. By tomorrow evening he'll be returning to an empty house if the police don't get him first.
My brother pulled a horrible prank on my delusional husband. My husband refused to answer my calls while I was in labor and my brother played a horrible prank. Now my husband is furious I won't cut him off. My husband and I got in a fight prior to my daughter birth a week ago, when he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. To be clear, this was completely out of the blue with no wanting or reason. I'm a homebody who works remotely with no male friends other than my brother. I told him that he was accusing me of infidelity and he said he just wanted to be sure. And kept bringing it up until I told him, after 3 days of him asking and the stress starting to make me physically ill, that I didn't want to talk to him and left to my brother's house. I called him while I was gone and tried to work it out but he refused. After all this I went home the next day to grab some things while he was at work, and I went into labor. I called him 16 times. Before calling my brother who called him another half a dozen times himself while on the way to pick me up and then on the way to the hospital. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. I started crowning in the car and the doctor delivered my daughter in the back of my brother's van because I was too far along to move me, before rushing me in when I kept bleeding. It was horrible. I hated it all. My brother's wife who is a nurse even told me she honestly thought I wouldn't make it. I also opted for a hysterectomy as it came to that or something more dangerous. I only ever wanted one or none but my husband wants a large family. I'm trying to bond with my daughter but it's been hard. The point is that during this while I was returning from surgery, 10 hours after I called, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said this is, Ops brother, I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it. And turned it off. My husband rushed over and got there when I had just woken up and started shouting until the security forced him out. And then didn't get to see our daughter until the next day because I was mostly asleep and apparently they needed my signature to allow him back. My sister-in-law thinks it was horribly cruel but that he deserved it. But my brother stands by his prank, and says that he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear he had felt at my side for 10 plus hours. Whenever he sees my husband he also keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. And he's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm still healing. My husband is furious that he won't apologize and that I won't make him and yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I am trying to be empathetic. I know he feels guilty. I've spoken to my therapist and she says the apathy I'm feeling is likely general and not solely focus on him from lingering shock from the trauma. But didn't say much about the prank. My mother-in-law has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank and that I should go no contact with my brother, and now my husband is saying the same. I'm not in a good headspace. It's been hard to be in the same room with my husband and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. He brought up the paternity once and I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mom if he's planning on stressing me out even more.
My mom neglected me and ditched me for her new family. So I decided to ditch her as well. Let me start with a little background about myself. I, 19 male, was born when my mom was only 17 and my dad was 19. They were young, impulsive, and unprepared for parenthood. Though they dated and eventually hooked up, they never married. My dad ended up in prison for the majority of my life, all for non-violent substance charges. This left my mom to fend for herself and for me. When I was 10, she married my stepdad. The new family structure seemed promising. At first, my mom seemed happy, and I was hopeful that this new beginning would bring us closer together. But that was far from reality. Things began to change when she got pregnant with my sister. Once my sister was born, it wasn't long before my mom got pregnant again with my brother. I slowly began to feel like a ghost in my own home. My mother's attention was diverted and I was pushed to the sidelines. She seemed to hardly notice me, let alone care about my feelings or needs. Emotional neglect settled in, and I felt unwanted, as if I didn't matter anymore. As I grew up, I continued to try to get her to talk to me, to notice me, to include me. But she was always preoccupied with my brother and sister. Every family activity became an exclusive event for them. It was always my stepdad, mom, and my siblings leaving me out as if I wasn't part of the family. I started to believe that my mom hated me, or at the very least disliked me. This realization was solidified one particular day that still haunts me. I remember vividly when my mom came into my room all dressed up and racing around. Curious, I asked if she was going somewhere, to which she quickly replied no. Content with her answer, I went back to playing on my computer, but no later than 15 minutes later, I heard the garage door go up. Confused and alarmed, I raced downstairs thinking what the F? Sure enough, my mom, stepdad, and my sister and brother were all dressed up and in the truck, and I was left standing outside feeling really uncomfortable. The look my mom gave me as she jumped into the truck was not one of regret or apology. It was a look of absolute disgust. Though I don't cry easily, something about that whole scene really got to me, and I went back inside to cry a bit before I managed to get over it. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. She texts me 10 minutes later telling me they're just going to the park. I remember thinking, but I didn't respond, fearing I would just work myself up again. Fast forward to when they got home. I was eating dinner and my 9-year-old sister rushed in after my mom, super excited to tell me about everything they had done. They hadn't gone to the park. My mom had lied to me. They'd actually gone to Dave & Buster's, got milkshakes and went shopping. I was crushed by it. And my little sister noticed I had gotten upset. Sensing my mom was about to make excuses and turn the circumstances into my fault, I excused myself to my room quietly to avoid a scene in front of my little sister and brother. The truth was, it super sucked. I had been trying so hard to be a good son. Despite the selfishness of my mother and the chaotic impact her ways had on me. Once I realized that her behavior wasn't normal, I began to question our relationship, the one we once had, and my place in the family. I didn't see any safe way out without ending up on the streets, broken, alone. Unemployed, by the way. In a desperate but determined move, I joined the army. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision and she still doesn't know. This was the first decision I'd actually made on my own. And I can't tell you how excited I am for VCT soon. So here I am. Sorry, everyone. I just wanted to get this off my chest. Thanks for listening. Entitled Mother broke up my engagement just by being rude. My girlfriend and I were really ready to be engaged. We'd both agreed we wanted to get married, but I hadn't done the formal proposal yet because we wanted to meet each other's families first. I always thought the old trope about meeting the in-laws being a big fiasco was a myth, both because I was younger and more naive then and because I'm lucky to have easy parents. My girlfriend met them for a few hours. Once we were alone, just me and them, I told them my intentions and my mom asked, "Does she have any kids already?" And my dad asked, "Does she have a good solid job?" And they both asked, "You really love her?" And that was that. I had their full support for the marriage. I thought meeting her parents would be the same. Some grilling was to be expected, but as long as I was honest and respectful, it would all be fine. They had my girlfriend when they were teenagers, by surprise, so now they had another baby that they called a do-over daughter who was just 6 years old and who they wanted to raise properly. My girlfriend and I made the trip up to their city and I met them for the first time over dinner at a steakhouse. It was pretty upscale and we'd scheduled the dinner for 8 p.m. So I was surprised to see they'd brought the kid along with them. I met everyone at once and the initial awkwardness settled once we sat down. We were making great small talk when the 6-year-old said she was thirsty. No big deal, right? Well, all of a sudden, her mother Ellen starts screaming, "Water, water, water." A waiter came rushing over to see what the commotion was and, without even making eye contact with the poor guy, "Ellen went, we've been here forever and no one's even gotten us any water. My daughter's been asking." We had been sitting for about 15 or 20 minutes without service, but they were visibly behind, and there were no circumstances that would have warranted that shouting. I should have realized, from how unfazed everyone else at the table was, that I should be bracing myself for a long night, but I couldn't imagine what was to come at that point. The waiter rushed over with water and apologized for the delay, explaining a few very large parties had arrived all at once. The guy seemed sincere and quite affable, so I thought the water would just be an anomaly in an otherwise pleasant night. Then Ellen kicked into full gear. "We'll need a kids menu," she informed the waiter. He said that they didn't have a kids menu, but that the chef could simplify most dishes. "What do you mean you don't have a kids menu?" Ellen replied in total disbelief, as though he'd said they didn't have a fire exit. He explained they didn't get too many child visitors and that there were enough plain foods on the menu that no separate menu had ever been necessary. Ellen sighed dramatically and waved him away. I tried to give him an apologetic glance, but understandably he didn't look back our way. I was so glad the poor guy left and didn't have to be subjected to her anymore. Meanwhile, she turned her attention on me, and I almost wished he'd come back. At least he was getting paid to be here. She was like, "So you're a screenwriter?" And I explained, "Well, yes and no. I want to be, but it's hard to get a job in that field that you can support yourself in. So I'm working at a nonprofit right now. There's a screenwriting component to the job though, so I'm really happy there." Ellen turned to her 6-year-old and went, "Hear that, hon? You want to be sure to snag a man who works for profit. Learn from this. It's not too late for you." I couldn't tell if she was trying to be funny or not, so I just let it pass, looking over to my girlfriend to see if she was even considering speaking up on my behalf. Nope. The waiter came back, visibly nervous. That hurt because he was so relaxed and personable at the start of the meal. He asked if we'd like to hear the specials before we ordered, and Ellen said sure. The waiter started saying, "First we have a lightly seared strip sweet." Ellen just shouted next. The waiter, "Oh, okay. Then we have a broiled leg of grass-fed." Ellen, next, and on until he'd gone through all 7 or 10 specials, even though she ultimately ordered off the menu. A plain ribeye, well done. She tried to order her daughter the same, but the kid said she just wanted plain mashed potatoes, so Ellen let her get mashed potatoes alone for dinner. After her order, she sent the waiter away. The rest of us hadn't even ordered yet, and everyone else just sat there like it was entirely normal. I waited for someone to say something, thinking it was more my girlfriend's place or her husband's, but when no one did I couldn't help myself. Was the one steak and potatoes going to be for all of us? Or, my girlfriend explained, in the tone you'd use for a tourist violating a sacred local taboo, "My mom always has the waiter put the kids' food in first, so it can get started right away. We'll order once the kitchen has hers." I thought she was joking, since Ellen didn't just order her kids' food, she also ordered her own dinner, so I laughed. "Something funny?" Ellen asked. Then I realized she was serious and I shut up. Thankfully her dad at least recognized that what was normal for them might not be as regular to me and tried to lighten the mood with a change of topic. But not even 10 minutes after we'd ordered, Ellen started in again. Another table that had been there long before we got a side order of mashed potatoes with their meal. Ellen threw a total conniption. She was sputtering so inaudibly that none of us could figure out what was wrong at first. Finally she managed to flag down some busboy who barely spoke English and began laying into him like he just sideswiped her on the freeway. He kept trying to explain he wasn't a server and he could go get one, but she wouldn't stop to breath long enough for him to find someone who could actually help. All the while I kept looking at my girlfriend for signs of embarrassment, or at the very least irritation, but you wouldn't have known if she was even hearing any of this. Our waiter came over, somehow still feigning a smile despite knowing what he was walking into, and Ellen actually goes, "Why did that table get mashed potatoes and ours haven't come yet?" The waiter kindly but concisely explained, "Well ma'am, Those people ordered potatoes before your party had placed their order. Ellen looks this man dead in the eye and says, well, it doesn't matter when they ordered it. My daughter is the youngest one here. Her food should come out first. You could tell the waiter was working hard to restrain himself at this point. He explained it was a first come, first served policy and age didn't help one way or the other. He offered to go check on the potatoes. Ellen agreed, or more specifically she said, yeah, you better, but I was clocking him and he went right back to his server station. 3 or 5 more minutes passed, during which we could have no other discussion at the table except how awful this restaurant was, how hungry the poor baby was. Her daughter hadn't said a word about being hungry this whole time and was constantly playing her loud iPad game, without headphones, disturbing all the other diners around us. Ironically, she said that Americans these days were just too selfish and had no respect for motherhood. I chimed in, I'm with you on that last part. And to my utter shock, instead of laughing at my joke, my girlfriend seemed annoyed with me. So after a few minutes the waiter comes back and says the potatoes will be out very soon. That's when Ellen did something I never thought I would see in real life. Update, entitled Mother broke up my engagement just by being rude. Ellen took 3 singles and a 5 out of her wallet and put them on the table in full view of the waiter. Then she took 1 single away and said every table I see getting potatoes before us is a bill gone. I was absolutely mortified. The waiter, to his unending credit, just took a deep breath and said I don't have control over the order in which the kitchen fires tickets, but what I can tell you is it should be out any minute. He then left without saying anything disparaging. I had been holding my tongue all night as well, in the name of my relationship, but once the tip hit the table I figured that if my girlfriend was half the woman I thought she was then she wouldn't mind my speaking up at this point. If anything she'd be supportive, right? So I scooted my chair back a bit and said, listen, I know what you're doing with the cash on the table, but that kind of thing makes me really uncomfortable, and it's just not called for. Please put the money away or we can just continue this some other time. My girlfriend's dad spits back, what? How cheap do you have to be to not believe in tipping service workers? Before I could process whether he was serious or yanking my chain, Ellen shocked me with, no, you know what, you're right, this isn't necessary. I should have known better than to be relieved. She folded the bills back into her wallet, patiently waited for the next plate of mashed potatoes to be carried out, and when it wasn't delivered to us, she went right up to a stranger's table and picked it up off their table. She half explained something about her daughter starving to death as she was walking away with the stranger's food, but unsurprisingly that wasn't convincing enough for them. The old lady she took it from followed her right over to our table and tried to take it back. I was already searching for my coat tag in preparation to go, but a shoving match was beginning to unfold. Between Ellen and an elderly woman with a tennis ball walker, and far be it for me to sit through all that had happened only to leave just as the night was getting interesting. The elderly woman was like, give me back my potatoes. Who are you? And the poor little girl was like, Mommy, it's okay, don't take someone else's food. But it all fell on deaf ears. Ellen yelled at the old lady, how could you sit there and eat these when my daughter hasn't even been served yet? She's sitting here hungry, just a little girl, and you're over there stuffing your face? Come on, other potatoes will be out any minute. And the old lady just said great, if they'll be out any minute, then what's the effing problem? To which Ellen still found holier than thou ground, gasping, language, please. Finally the waiter, and this time someone higher up as well, came over to separate them, as they had begun to raise their voices and cause a disturbance. Staff had already asked Ellen to turn down her daughter's iPad multiple times without heat, and I'm guessing the waiter informed management about the tip on the table, stunt she pulled, because this was their final straw. They told us we were going to have to leave the restaurant. But we don't even have our food yet. Ellen complained to the guy. This was clearly not the manager's first rodeo. You can take the food that's already been served free of charge, everything else will be cancelled. Please leave immediately. The old lady didn't miss her chance to knock the potatoes right onto the floor so we couldn't try to take them with us. Nothing else had been served yet, so we had to leave without any food. When my girlfriend and I were finally alone in our car she said, can you believe that? And I said, not at all. And I really can't believe you didn't warn me. And she went, how could I have known about any of that? And, confused, I asked, is she not usually like that? Even more confused than me, my girlfriend asked. Who? Your mom. What's my mom got to do with the terrible service at that place? That was the beginning of the end of our relationship. The fact that she didn't see anything wrong with her mom's behavior, and that I'd be marrying into that situation, shook me too deep. We both dodged a bullet in more ways than one. In hindsight, we weren't right for each other, regardless of who her family was. I crashed my homewrecker sister's wedding with my ex. I, 24, was with my ex-fiancé N, 27, since I was 13 and he was 15. He was my first love, my first everything. We got engaged when I was 20 and about 6 months after we found out we were expecting. Unfortunately I miscarried a couple days later. That was the worst moment of our lives. We always dreamed about starting a family early, so this was a major blow to us individually and to our relationship. I fell into deep depression and I admit I was wrong for only caring for the lost I felt and not my partner's. We argued a lot, he partially blamed me and I accused him of not knowing how it felt to lose a life you were growing inside you. We were hurting each other and decided to separate for a while, that while turned into a year. We still kept in contact, I went to therapy and worked on healing myself, he even came to a few sessions with me. We decided to get back together shortly after my 23rd birthday. However, the relationship wasn't the same. He was somewhat withdrawn from me and I thought it was because he still blamed me. I was sick overthinking and worrying. It got to the point where I was going backwards in my process, so I decided to snoop through his phone. I found out during the year we separated he had been confiding in my sister, 27, and it turned to something intimate. He cut it off when we got back together, but the damage was done. She was pregnant. Turns out my parents knew about this and some of our friends. I kicked him out and cut off everybody who knew. Well, a couple weeks ago I got an invite to the wedding. Something snapped inside of me, I got drunk and I took a cab to my parents' house where they were throwing a party for them. Most of my family was there. I basically showed up and gave a whole F you speech to everybody. My sister ran upstairs in tears and my parents called me in a hole for ruining the prospect of their wedding. I said good because nobody apologized to me, everybody just kept saying we were separated. Things happen, people fall in love, I should be happy for them, the heart wants what I wants. The worst part is my sister told me maybe my baby died for a reason so she could get her happy ending. What's something that people don't understand until they experience themselves? I always thought I was straight. I mean, I had crushes on boys in high school and dated them like any other girl. But then I met her. Let's call her Jay. Jay was a senior when I was a junior and she was already out and proud. I remember seeing her walking around school with her girlfriend and feeling a twinge of jealousy mixed with curiosity. I didn't know being gay was an option for me until I met her. We became friends pretty quickly. There was something about her that drew me in. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, or the fact that she was so confident in her sexuality. I found myself wanting to be around her all the time. We would talk for hours in the library or hang out at each other's houses. Looking back, I see now that I was developing feelings for her, but at the time I just thought we were good friends. Then, one night, we got intoxicated together. It wasn't planned or anything. We just decided to hang out and blew through a bottle of vodka. We were sitting on her bed, listening to music and laughing like we always did. And then she kissed me. It wasn't a tentative, uncertain kiss. It was confident and hungry and electric. I remember feeling like my whole body was on fire. It was like everything clicked into place all at once and I knew, without a doubt, that I was gay. That kiss led to more kisses, and then to intimacy. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say that Jay knew exactly what she was doing. It was like she had been waiting for that moment for months and had planned everything out perfectly. And I loved it. I loved the way she made me feel, the way she knew my body better than I did. I loved the way she looked at me, like I was the most beautiful thing in the world. But then things got complicated. I still had a boyfriend, and he knew something was up. Maybe he sensed the change in me, or maybe Jay and I were just being obvious. Either way, he confronted me about it and I broke down. I told him everything, that I was gay, that I had cheated on him, that I was in love with Jay. He was devastated, understandably, and I felt like poop. After that, things spiraled out of control. Jay and I tried to keep our relationship under wraps, but word got out and soon everyone knew. There were whispers behind our backs, rumors circulating about us being perverts or deviants. I tried to ignore them, tried to focus on my happiness with Jay, but it was hard. My parents were furious when they found out, and suddenly everything became about my sexuality. I lost friends and felt like an outcast. But through it all, I had Jay. She was my rock, my support system, the person who loved me for who I was. And then, just when things were starting to feel like they might be okay, she got accepted to an out-of-state college. I was devastated. I didn't want to lose her, didn't want to go back to feeling like an outsider. But she was determined to go, to make something of herself, and so she did. We tried to make a long-distance relationship work, but it was hard. We were too young and inexperienced to know how to handle it. And then, one day, she stopped answering my calls. I panicked, tried to find out what was going on, but it was like she had disappeared off the face of the earth. I know now that she met someone else, someone she could be open and public with. But at the time, I was heartbroken. I felt like everything I had been through, all the pain and struggle, had been for nothing. It took me years to get over her, to come to terms with my own sexuality, and even now I still think about her sometimes. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, because it taught me something that I couldn't have learned any other way, that love is love, and it's worth fighting for. And that's why I'm here now, standing outside her door. I'm not sure what I'll find on the other side. Will she be happy to see me? Will she be angry? Will she even remember me? All I know is that I'm not leaving until I get some answers. I'm ready to fight for what I believe in, and I'm ready to experience it for myself.
An accident caused by my husband left me infertile. We never told anyone about why I was infertile because we were scared it would change their opinion of him. I had always wanted to adopt, so it wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. After 2 long years, I am very happy to have a baby that will hopefully be coming into our home. I thought we were both happy and on the same page, but 2 days ago I found out he was cheating. A woman messaged me a photo of an image of them in bed together, along with a message that said, "If this is your man, he's a cheating piece of crap." I recognized the painting behind the bed from when we were on FaceTime. He was supposed to be on a work trip. I loved this man. I protected him from hate and blame. All I wanted was the same love and support back. We are in the late stages of adoption paperwork, and I think separating will get in the way of the adoption. Which would get in the way of me having children, but not him. If I break it off, I will F up my future family. I've been heading the majority of paperwork, I've been preparing the nursery, and schedules. I never really considered that I wouldn't be able to love and raise children because of my infertility, but being a single woman makes adoption so much harder, even though I would be able to be financially stable on my own. I have called my mom and I do intend to tell her. Edit, I will be leaving my husband. I told my mother and my best friend everything last night. They will be helping me figure out when, how, and where is best for filing. I don't know when I will file, but I will be staying with my best friend for now while I get my bearings. We are making a plan on how to proceed.
I traumatized my partner and am uncertain about how to fix the damage I've caused. Is there a way back? We have been in a relationship for 3 years, but it wasn't until about a year ago that I realized I was causing her trauma. When we moved in together, I didn't realize how broken I was inside. I became emotionally unavailable, often dismissing her insecurities and neglecting her feelings. I had become selfish and self-centered. Most of my time was spent on my computer, gaming with friends, and I rarely helped with household chores, leaving everything for her to handle. Occasionally, I would do the dishes or cook, but it was infrequent. I knew I was being a terrible partner. There were times when I pressured her sexually, not respecting her boundaries, and she would sometimes give in just to avoid conflict. She tried talking to me about this, but I couldn't really listen and often made poor excuses. I was immature and obnoxious. I want to acknowledge that my words may still sound like I'm making excuses, but after many conversations and her attempt to break up with me, I genuinely realized the extent of the damage I caused her during these 2 years. She was suffering alone. After she bravely confronted me about how I had been treating her, I felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and remorse. It was eye-opening to realize that I needed her to point out what I was doing wrong. Even now, as I write this, I am disgusted with myself. I opened up to her and expressed my true feelings, genuinely remorseful and disgusted with my behavior. We had more discussions, and she agreed to give me another chance, but with one condition: if any of my past behaviors resurfaced, she would instantly break up with me. I completely understand and agree with her condition. It is completely reasonable. I know that I can be better. I can't change the past, but I will carry the guilt forever, and it's something I need to address on my own. I am actively seeking help for my personal issues, like understanding why I did those horrible things without realizing it. I am already aware of being pre-diagnosed with ADHD, but I am consulting healthcare professionals to investigate any other underlying issues and searching for a suitable therapist. Currently, I'm struggling with 2 things, and I desperately need guidance. 1. I don't know how I can repair the damage I've caused and mend things with her, knowing that I was the one who traumatized her. 2. I don't know how to cope with my guilt without it negatively affecting her. I deeply love her and never intended to act in such hurtful ways, but I did, and now I'm determined to make amends. I understand that it might not work out, and I'm prepared to let go if my efforts further harm her. What steps can I take to make things right?
My overbearing stepmother tried to destroy a memoir of me and my late mother, so I turned to my dad for help. I feel heartbroken. About a year ago I started college and had the choice between living at home or living on campus. I asked my dad for advice and he let me stay rent-free as long as I did housekeeping, such as taking out the trash, doing dishes, etc., which I thought was a good deal. However, due to my psychopathic stepmother, I am no longer living with my dad. I lost my mom to cancer about a year ago, right before college was about to start. I was devastated, and I never truly recovered, but my dad never seemed too distressed about it. I never saw him cry, I never had to console him, he did not cry at the funeral or show much emotion at all. 2 months after my mother's death, my dad announced he was seeing a new woman. I was furious. How could he do this? How could we get over my mother so easily? I begrudgingly accepted his new relationship. I officially met her when we all went out to dinner together at my dad's favorite restaurant. I did not like her from the jump. She is very bossy, loud and brash, she doesn't have very much of a filter, makes dark humor about everything, can get a bit impatient, and claims brutally honest, when in reality she is just a jerk. I wasn't a huge fan of her, but I kept my opinion to myself for the sake of my dad. After 2 more months, she moved in with us. It's almost like overnight, this woman did a complete 180. She became very pushy about us spending time together. She didn't care if I was sick or tired, or how much college work I had to do. She was obsessed with us going out and doing some activity together, which, might I mention, was always something she wanted to do, regardless of whether I liked it or not. She would hug me a lot, which made me very uncomfortable, and always talked about how we're the most amazing mother-daughter duo. Again, it made me agitated, but I kept my mouth shut. Until one day it hit the fan. I have a picture of me and my mom that I would keep at my bedside. A week ago, it mysteriously disappeared. I asked my dad and his wife, he proposed after 3 months of dating and they got married a month later, if they had any idea where it was, and my dad said I must have moved it while I was dusting. I spent the whole day looking for it. I couldn't find it anywhere in the house. I knew something was off because I would never just misplace a picture of my mom. In the evening, I was taking out the trash, and inside the dumpster was the picture of my mother and I, still in its frame with the glass cracked. To say I was livid would be a huge understatement. I didn't throw the picture out, and my dad has never touched it, so it had to be my stepmother. I got the picture out, and stormed inside the house. My dad and his wife were in their room upstairs. So I barged in and went up to my stepmother, asking, would you care to explain why this photo of my mom and I was in the dumpster? She denied it. She said she had never touched the picture, claiming I must have thrown it out by accident. I called her a liar, and my dad told me to show some respect to her. She then confessed to throwing out the picture, and proceeded to play the victim. She cried, saying she felt neglected and that I would never love her the same way I loved my mom and that she just wanted to be a part of the family. I snapped. I told her that she was right, I would never love her like I loved my mom, because I would never love a lying bitch who stole from me. My dad took her side right there and then. He asked how I could be so cruel and that she just wanted to be loved and appreciated. He then stated it was something my mother would have wanted. I told my dad that his wife had always been annoying and overbearing. I said I had tried to make things work and was willing to put up with her for his sake, but that stealing from me and trying to erase my mom was where I drew the line. Even though I already knew the answer, I gave my dad an ultimatum. I told him it was me or his wife. He screamed at me to get out. So I took the picture, got in my car, and drove off. I ended up staying at my cousin's apartment for the night. My dad texted me saying to come get my stuff, that I was no longer welcome in his house, and proceeded to call me an ungrateful brat. The next day, my cousin and I went back to my dad's house and we found all my stuff on the lawn. We loaded up everything into her car and took it back to the apartment. I blocked my dad and his wife and I'm currently no contact with both of them.
Husband smashed cake in my face on my wedding day. And experienced the shortest marriage of his life. My fiancé at the time was obsessed with the cake smashing videos men do on weddings day. He found it absolutely hilarious and he wanted to do it on our wedding day too. I told him no because that would ruin my hair, makeup, dress, and my mood. He kept bothering me with the same question up until our wedding. I showed him the prices of everything I was wearing that day and what he would destroy if he went through with it. It seemed like he finally understood. The day of the wedding comes and we're cutting the cake. I was about to feed him a piece of the cake when he launched a piece in my face. The room went quiet in an instant, but my husband and his friends were boisterous. My maid of honor came to wipe my face and I saw my husband high-fiving all of his friends. I felt so disrespected and humiliated. It felt like everything I had done to get to this point in my life was completely pointless. I started bawling my eyes out and my husband only laughed harder. He said I was upholding the tradition perfectly because the groom has to smash the cake in the bride's face and the bride has to freak out, which was definitely happening. Hours later, I talked to my husband privately and asked why he did that even though we discussed that he wouldn't. He said it's because his friends dared him to and he never turns down a dare. I was furious. He ruined my wedding because of a stupid dare. He didn't listen to his soon-to-be wife but he listened to his friends. It was clear where his priorities lay. I told him that we were getting an annulment the next day and he could marry his friends if they were that important to him. I, on the other hand, was going on my honeymoon trip with my maid of honor. He was yelling at me that I was being unfair and even called me a beach. I left the room at that moment and went to grab some cake, and when I went back, I threw it in his face. It felt like the perfect revenge. What is the perfect example of the unfair cruelty of this world? When I was in middle school there was a kid who was really quiet. He didn't have friends since he looked weird and just didn't fit in with anybody, so he just kept to himself. One day this group of scene kids were acting all friendly to him, like they were hanging out with him and everything. Then in the library, when it was this girl's birthday, he came up to her with this little brown lunch bag and said happy birthday, which just about shocked everyone because he never spoke to someone voluntarily. He always waited until someone would speak to him or ask him a question. She opened it and it was a silver necklace he made himself. It was really pretty. It had glass lined up almost in the swirl and the glass was cut to look like a little diamond and they were glued on a shell. She gave him a big hug and everyone saw that he turned red and looked a bit nauseous afterward. Months later they were found passing notes and hanging out more. Some kids thought they were dating, everyone else knew he had a crush on her. The two looked cute together, they would eat, read, and laugh together. He was even there for her when she had got trouble. Some of the teachers called him her angel. Everything was going fine for them until he found out that she had been sharing their notes to their friends, some of which had really private things about him, like how his father abused him when he was younger and how he had testicular cancer a couple years prior. Naturally he just blew up and confronted her. I have to say the look on his face will always stick with me. In the middle of their fight she just went out and said that they were never friends and that the reason why she acted like a friend was because he was ugly and felt sorry for him. He calmed down but was visually heartbroken, so he just turned around and walked away. About a week later he just stopped showing up to classes, but people kept saying that they saw him eating his lunch outside at the end of the field. Well, it turns out that he ended up getting in school suspension for some reason. Whether it was that fight he had with that girl or if he got in a fight, nobody really knows. He got back to keeping to himself. You wouldn't see him with those groups of kids anymore. Less and less people started seeing him until it was like he disappeared altogether. Turns out he has been either skipping school or being locked up alone in school suspension. The school then found out that he has been getting bullied on the bus and at home. On the bus he would be thrown around from seat to seat in the back and then would be followed home while the same dirtbags would throw rocks and erasers at him. The teachers went with the same gag of there's no proof of bullying, so there was nothing anyone could do, but it was apparent that the bullying was getting worse. One morning he was seen eating lunch again, but he was wearing a jacket. It was late April and the temperature would peak at around 90 degrees. The teachers took him to the counselor and they ended up finding out he had been hurting himself for the past month. Instead of getting him help they just stuck him in school suspension again. Then came the rumors that he ate rats for lunch. It would all be over because he was found unalive in the in-school suspension room he was locked in. The school then held an assembly to announce his passing and for some reason everyone was sad. I personally was really shocked and I honestly felt at fault for not doing anything. The group that pretended to be his friends all acted like they loved him. Their sounds of crying were so fake. The girl he had a crush on acted like she lost the love of her life, how he was always there for her and ended up throwing a huge pity party for herself. I just took a DNA test, and what I found out terrified me. I did one of those at-home DNA testing kits. You know the ones, they can supposedly tell you your ancestral makeup, help you connect with long-lost relatives, that sort of thing. The specific test I used had this option to make your DNA available to law enforcement. That way, if there was a partial DNA match to a crime scene or victim, my DNA may help law enforcement identify the perpetrator. Maybe I shouldn't have opted in. The thing is, I've read about these a lot in the news. If you're a true crime fan, you know that these kits can sometimes lead police to catch decades-old serial killers and rapists that have long eluded capture. My thinking was that if one of my family members is actually a monster, Well, I would want them behind bars, regardless of who it is. So, I opted in, but never really considered the possibility that there'd be a match. And then there was. I was contacted by my local police department and notified that my DNA had been a partial match to a Jane Doe, and that they'd like my help in identifying her. That was honestly not what I was expecting. I was a match for a dead woman? The police explained to me that our DNA profiles indicated we may have been related, and that they wanted to know if I knew of any relatives who had gone missing or hadn't been heard from in the past 5 years. 5 years? Yes, because they've determined her time of death was about 5 years ago based on the state of her body when it was found. They've reason to believe it's a homicide, although they weren't able to tell me the cause of death. Apparently, due to the state of her remains, it was impossible to tell. Well, I didn't know of any family members who've gone missing, but I don't know my extended family all that well. I decided to get my mother involved, who does genealogy. She worked with the police, going through our family tree, but ultimately, we couldn't find anyone. So, someone we didn't know we were related to, possibly? At this point, we decided to talk to the rest of my family, immediate and extended, to see if anyone else knew anything. Most of our family members thought it was pretty cool and wanted to see the mystery solved, though a few were angry at me for giving my DNA to law enforcement in the first place. The police showed us a sketch of what they think the woman would have looked like, and my mother and I agreed she had some resemblance to my Aunt Linda, particularly in the strong brow and high cheekbones. The police decided to ask Aunt Linda and her 2 children, Ethan and Bex, to submit DNA samples. They agreed. It took about 2 weeks to hear back from the police after their samples had been submitted. They probably weren't at the top of the priority list for the crime lab. But when they did get the results back, they asked Bex and Aunt Linda specifically to come down to the station. Bex actually asked me to come with her. She and I were really close growing up, basically best friends. We've lost touch over the years, but I still consider her a close friend. I agreed to go in with her, even though I wasn't sure why she wanted me there, when the police told us what they found. To say I was shocked is an understatement. The DNA from Jane Doe was an exact match to Bex. Of course, my initial thought was that there had to have been some mistake. I asked what the likelihood is that the DNA matched Bex without actually coming from her. 1 in 5.4 billion, they said. They told us that this was extremely perplexing and that they had no explanation for the match. I asked Aunt Linda if Bex had an identical twin that nobody knew about. Maybe, but she shook her head. The police told us that identical twins don't actually have perfectly identical DNA anyway, so that couldn't explain the match. I was perturbed. I'm sure you can imagine why. Bex and Aunt Linda, though, were not. They laughed, actually laughed, when the police presented them with their evidence and shrugged it off. Isn't that just the weirdest thing? Said Aunt Linda. They were both smiling and giggling the rest of the time, which clearly made the police uncomfortable. They told the police that they hoped Jane Doe could be identified one day, but that they were pretty sure they couldn't help any further, and then left the police station. I followed after them in a daze, confused both by what the police had told us and by Bex and Aunt Linda's behavior. On the way home, I asked Bex if it truly didn't bother her. She said, "Come on, Veronica, there's obviously been some mistake. It's just not possible for my DNA to match exactly with a dead woman's. The cops screwed something up, and they'll probably figure it out in a few days and call us and apologize. Don't worry so much about it." I tried to take her advice. My mom even agreed with her, saying it had to be some sort of error and that it would get cleared up sooner or later. 3 days after we spoke to police, Bex, Ethan and Aunt Linda vanished. My mom had gone over to their place to borrow some family photo albums from Aunt Linda to discover that the front door was unlocked and open. Nobody was inside. We tried to reach them on their cell phones, but were informed that their numbers had all been disconnected. Nothing was missing from the house. They didn't take any personal belongings. Their cars were in the garage. It was like they just vanished, and they didn't come back. We reported them missing, of course. And a few days after that, the police asked my mom and me to come down to the station. That's when they revealed that they'd run Aunt Linda and Ethan's DNA through their databases and came up with 2 more exact matches. To a Jane and John Doe, whose bodies were found within 50 miles of each other in the original Jane Doe. All of them died about 5 years ago. Once is a mistake or maybe a weird, freakish coincidence. But 3 times? The police were baffled. They asked us for all the information we could give them on my aunt's family. They specifically wanted to know what they were doing 5 years ago. All we could tell them is that they'd gone on a family vacation that year, and had been gone a week longer than they'd planned. But otherwise, we had nothing useful. It's been a few months since then. The police have no answers for us, and we have no answers for them. I keep waiting for Bex to call or show up. Or any of them, really. But it's like they vanished off the face of the earth. The worst part is that there's nothing I can do. I've done so much research to try to find something that can explain what's going on, but I can't come up with a theory that makes sense. Nothing grounded in reality, anyway. All I wanted to know is if I'm part Irish, and instead I ended up discovering that my family isn't at all what it seems. Oops, I just taught my brother to piss on people in public. Being the cool dude I am, I try my best to entertain my brother with autism. One thing he really enjoys is me reading Reddit threads to him. He loves Am I the A-hole and today I effed up threads, but his favorite thing is the comments. He loves the comments because he treats it like having a conversation. My brother is actually a very smart kid, he just doesn't understand certain concepts. He thinks very differently than the normal person. One thing that's especially hard for him to grasp is sarcasm, so sometimes I have to explain to him if something I said was a joke or not. If most of you haven't caught on by now, loads of people have realized that when in an awkward situation, peeing everywhere asserts dominance and makes you alpha as F. This joke comes up in the comment sections that I read to him a lot, and I guess I have never taken the time to specifically explain that no, you should not actually drop your pants and piss in public. I never thought it was necessary. Today my brother, while in school, was scolded for not listening to his teacher who repeatedly told him to stop breaking the graphite off his pencil so he could just sharpen it again. He refused to listen and his teacher raised his voice. Finally, my brother casually said, "I'm the dominant person, Mr. Jacobs," dropped his drawers and urinated all down the cabinets and onto stacks of graded tests and medical forms for an upcoming field trip. He immediately blames me for teaching him how to be alpha, and I get my lunch breaks taken away from me for 2 weeks. F my life. My dad laughed so hard when I explained the situation to him that he ended up taking my brother and I out to dinner to get our minds off of it.
What is the scariest, strangest, most unexplainable thing that has happened to you while home alone? Not home alone, but upstairs alone. I saw a doppelganger of my mom a few years back, and I think she heard mine. I was sitting in my bed, and looked up when I heard her coming up the stairs. She walked by my door, looking straight at me with no expression, and walked into her room and closed the door. I'd said hi as she walked but figured whatever, she didn't hear me or maybe she was getting something from her room. Then, about 5 seconds later, she yells up the stairs from downstairs and says, "Did you call me?" And I am not ashamed to say I freaked the F out. She came upstairs, looked down the hall and said, "Did you close my door?" I didn't, and neither did she. She never closed that door because one of our cats primarily lived in her bedroom and so she always kept the door open so the cat could come and go as she pleased. And it wasn't just closed as if the wind had shut it was fully closed and the windows were shut. Ma said she had very clearly heard me yell, "Hey mom, come here," from upstairs. I had done no such thing. I'm never entirely sure what I believe and what I don't, but I was totally sober, not tired, and it wasn't some movement out of the corner of the eye thing.
What is the biggest shock you've ever received in a courtroom? I was clerking in a very small paternity courtroom. It was so small it had one bench in the gallery. Mom brought her new significant other who just decided mid-hearing to punch Dad in the mouth. Then he ran. The courtroom was so small, and the blood from Dad's mouth and nose went all over me and the judge. I pushed the button for a sheriff and met him at the door with boyfriend's name and description. The sheriff was able to catch the boyfriend about a half a mile away from the courthouse. Mom had the car keys. Paramedics saw Dad, and we resumed the hearing minus boyfriend. The hearing was right before lunch recess, but neither the judge or I had time to go home and had to wear a blood-sprayed clothes for the day. Yuck. Oh yeah, boyfriend got 6 months for a simple assault and another 5 months 29 days for contempt, consecutive in jail.
Parents, has your kid ever broke character and acted like an adult? This happened about 2 years ago and I was so blown away I took notes on it. My 5-year-old son was pretty typical for his age, always goofing around, never serious, always working some angle to negotiate treats or buying whatever thing was at the top of his list this week. Kids have a selfish worldview and that's mostly understandable because they haven't matured yet. So when my son asked me to go for a walk, just the two of us, I immediately laughed and thought, okay, what's he going to ask for? We start walking and I ask, "What's on your mind, buddy?" He said, "Nothing really, I just want to have some time to be with you and be peaceful and be out in nature." Wow, okay, this is progress, I thought. Then he said, "I want you to know you're the best dad I've ever had. You really do help me and my sister a lot and you're really very nice, even though we don't usually tell you. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything and that I want to be near you always." By this point, the only reason I wasn't completely crying my eyes out is that I thought it was some kind of a joke or lead up to ask for something. This was totally out of character, especially at this age. I managed to croak out something like, "I'm really glad to hear that and I love you very much." Then we just enjoyed the rest of the walk. What was the reaction of HR when you resigned? I was with the firm for about 5 years 3 months. One fine day, I got an offer letter from a leading MNC in trending technology. I resigned the same day and sent the mail to my manager and ceased HR in the evening. He called me around 10 a.m. next day and inquired about good time to have discussion. I went at 12 and we had a very short discussion and the conversation went like this. I share a cordial relationship with most of my management. HR, we respect your decision of resign and we wish you all the best. Can you please tell me your team details and your manager? Me, thanks, and told the details. HR, so, 30 will be your last day with us. May I know the reason for resignation? Me, I don't like the management here. Is the feedback I am going to share with you just for record's sake? Or you are actually going to share this with management? HR, what made you think feedback was not shared with the management? Me, I have many scenarios where feedback was taken but never acted upon. HR, I will make sure. Please share. Me, fine, anyways, I have made my decision but I don't want to leave unspoken about the fact. I have never thought of resigning from this organization. But, many fake promises are made. HR, who made false promise? Me, you know who usually does. HR, smiles. Me, I have been promised an on-site without being asked and I know there was a budget problem in project but management is frequently flying which made me rethink my place here. HR, okay, got the reason. Anyways, he explained about all the policies and rules to be followed during notice period and we are done for that day. I went to my usual routine. Within next few hours, my resource manager, not my immediate supervisor, walks up to me and asks if I would take back my resignation if offered an on-site. Next day, I get a call location HR and he asked me if I would be offered on-site I would stay back. I said I might think. Next day RM comes to me, a new on-site opportunity has popped up in some other project and they're looking for people. I gave them your name to them, talk to them and let me know. I said I need some time and I have few questions. Is it long term? What is the expectation? Is it different from my existing stack? How long would it be? For all he said, you can manage. It will be minimum of 1 year. I said okay and we'll let you know of couple of days. He asked me to do it faster? I called the other manager on Friday and asked him the same above questions, for which he said it is an immediate requirement from client. And I need to learn new technology. If I am okay with it, I need to take back my resignation so that they could do initiate visa. I asked him, what is stopping you from initiating visa if I am serving notice period? He said it is policy. I said okay. I told him I will take my resignation, but on one condition. In case the visa is rejected / client doesn't like profile. I want a written statement that my last date would be the same day as earlier. For which, he is not sure. He need to talk to HR on that. I am confused and lost in thought. I said I will get back to him on Monday. On the same day, I went to a shop nearby, bought a couple of beer and started thinking of the opportunity. For an instance, I thought I better take my resignation back. And travel abroad. It has been one of my dreams to stay abroad for at least a year straight. I gave it a thought over weekend and slept over it. I called my brother, whom I go to for advice. He said only one thing: if you have ever taken steps, stick to that no matter what. That is what makes you better person. And at the same time I heard quote in movie which said, when you say no to bigger things in life you grow stronger. Then I decided I will continue with my resignation. I met my RM on Monday, told him that I don't want to take risk. I am not getting confidence in this opportunity. He said okay. I told the same to the other manager. He said no problem. After this I got 3 more calls from HR reg, change of project, change of technology, on-site again, and had around 7 to 8 meetings with manager. On my last day, which is mid-March, whole country came to a standstill cause of corona and all the on-site travels are suspend. I am happy that I made a correct decision. Had I stayed with on-site promise, my future could have come to a standstill. Always stick with your decision, and move forward sincerely. It is destined to happen whichever is to happen. Cheers. Why did you regret rejecting your girl / guy best friend? Although we went to different universities, I had the same best friend from high school. He was the opposite sex and had a thing for me since about 8th grade, but I never reciprocated. I may have unintentionally led him on for a while, but when he bluntly asked, I bluntly said no. Friendship moves on. I had become really close friends with a girl at my uni and introduced the two of them. They got together and everyone was happy. I moved into a house with the girl. They continued dating. My selfishness and poor attitude towards their relationship strained both friendships. Although to be fair, she wasn't being as kind to me as she could have, and of course, as her boyfriend, he took her side. I wanted all of my friendships to stay the same, with me being the center of attention, and they wanted their romantic relationship to blossom. They eventually moved in together and I saw less and less of them. I chalked it up to her being jealous that he used to be into me and that she was afraid he'd leave her for me because I'm more attractive. In reality, I was being a selfish stuck-up bitch who always put myself first. They got married and I never saw or heard from them again. Back when I was 20 I started fooling around with a girl who'd been my friend for a few years. We started hanging out a ton and sleeping together for a brief period. Eventually, she confessed her feelings for me and I told her that they weren't reciprocated and that I wasn't interested in a relationship. She ended up transferring schools and moving across the country. We didn't speak much after that and I quickly moved on with my life and essentially forgot about her. A dozen years later we reconnect on social media and after chatting for a bit I discovered that I had essentially wrecked her. She had been in love with me and had figured I was the one. My rejection sent her into a tailspin and she'd transferred schools because her grades had dropped off a cliff once I shot her down. I apparently ruined certain foods and songs for her for years as they were things she associated with me, things which I sadly don't even recall. Even her new friends knew about and loathed me. I was the one who had broken her and who all subsequent men were compared against. Eventually, she got over it and is now happily married with a family, but it really shocked me to think I'd basically been a wrecking ball that had smashed through her life and it had taken her a good 5 to 7 years to put the pieces back together. Especially when I hardly remembered what we did together once she left. My family cut contact with me for 9 years because of a lie. Now it's my turn for revenge. My cousin accused me of something I didn't do, and my family were so disgusted by me that they cut contact. I just feel so lost on what to do. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. My parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. The same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. But when we got older we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends. But she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding Eve. Eve is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point, I hadn't even seen Eve for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of sexually assaulting Eve back when we were children. That Eve had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. Eve had told them that back when she was 9, and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that Eve is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that Eve gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her no. Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. Two of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call I went to have a long shower. To this day I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even Eve. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this effed me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him I am sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass, but I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt Eve and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less, sober now for 4+ years, and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego etc. And last year I moved from my shitty apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still have problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating, but only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asked about my family? Oh, you know they accused me of a heinous crime and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, who I like a lot. If this text was difficult to follow, I apologize. I'm not good with words on the best of days, and I started rambling a bit when it all came back to me. It's already getting long so I will fast forward to my current issue. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification for hours before opening it. Yesterday, another text followed. Translated, they basically say. Text 1, "Hi, it's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." Here she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Mom and Dad text 2, "Hi, we understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, Eve was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect Eve and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What Eve did was wrong and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Mom and Dad." So yeah. That's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, SHT memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to making my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okayish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else than her.
My husband asked for a paternity test. It came back positive, but our relationship was never the same. My 24 female, husband, 31 male, and I have 3 children. Our sons look exactly like him, dark skin and dark eyes and hair, but our daughter doesn't. She looks exactly like my great-grandparents, really pale, blonde and green-eyed, but apparently he didn't think it was possible that our daughter could look like my great-grandparents, and from the moment he saw her he told me he wanted a paternity test. At first I refused because I felt it was humiliating and because I didn't think it was necessary, because I never cheated on him and I hoped he would trust me but he didn't, and for the first 2 months of our daughter's life he made my life hell. He didn't want to hold her even if she cried desperately while I was doing something else. He never woke up at night to help me with her, he never helped me with anything, and that hurt me so much because with our boys he was completely different. He helped me all the time with absolutely everything and he was always there for me after giving birth, but this time he left me alone and it was the worst experience of my life. I have no family here and his entire family from the moment they saw my daughter turned their backs on me. I don't have any friends here either, so it was just my daughter and me. She is a colicky baby, so it was very difficult for me to do everything alone and on top of that help with our sons. I decided to do the paternity test because one day his entire family came to our house to celebrate my son's birthday and no one spoke to me, and they didn't want to include my daughter in the photos that my in-laws took of all the grandchildren, so I knew it was stupid to keep waiting for them to come to their senses. Well, the paternity test came back positive and everyone was shocked, and of course they felt guilty for not having believed in me. Everyone apologized and my husband even cried when he held our daughter in his arms for the first time, and I know that his apologies were genuine and that's why I forgave him. But I don't know if I can forgive his family. They treated me really badly and said horrible things about me just a few days after giving birth, and I can't forget their insults or violence. My husband knows that I don't want to see his family, nor do I want them near any of our children, and he told his family. So these last 3 months it has been just the 5 of us, but it doesn't feel as good as I expected. My husband is constantly apologizing and crying every time he holds our daughter, and I'm getting tired of this situation. I want us to be happy as we were before, so how can we move on? My husband suggested that we should start couples therapy. How much can therapy help?
What's your psycho ex story? He stole my prescription medication and refused to give it back until I got back together with him. I told my older brother, who convinced him to stop. He harassed me at work for over an hour. He knew there were no other employees in the store. He called my cell endlessly until I blocked him. Then he started calling my job's phone, threatened to come in and cause a scene to get me fired once a manager arrived if I didn't speak to him. I had no way of blocking him, and if I didn't answer the phone the computer would log a missed call. So after the 30th call or so I just kept picking it up and hanging it up straight away rather than talking to him. Was too scared to call the cops. I told my older brother and he convinced the ex to stop. He threatened to take his life if I didn't get back together with him. I asked if he was serious. He said yes. So I finally worked up the courage to call the police on him. They took him to the hospital. He was there for 3 hours. They decided it was a panic attack, released him, and the harassment continued as soon as he was out. He did all that in one day. He endlessly harassed my friends, lied to them, would message them in the middle of the night, send them hundreds of messages a day. He threatened me, if I ever see you with anyone else you won't be so pretty anymore, and the guy is gonna regret talking to you. He talked crap about me to anyone that would listen, lie about why we broke up, called me names, anything he could think of. Did the same on social media. I told my grandma and she had him delete the posts. He called me once he found out I made a Tinder, by seeing me on his own Tinder, used his friend's phone to call me and was literally screaming at me. He ended up punching a hole in his wall. One night he announced he was coming over to my place. He knew my dad's work schedule and knew I would be home alone. Luckily I was staying over a friend's house that night. I had to call him and tell him to leave me alone. A few days later, he again, knowing my dad's work schedule, knew I would be home alone. And I was. Unfortunately, he announced he was on his way over, that we were going to talk it out and do what it takes to get back together. With all his previous behavior, this terrified me. I started having a severe panic attack, worst one I've ever had. I told him to leave me alone. I didn't want to talk to him. We weren't getting back together. He said he didn't care, was coming over anyway. Even when I was crying hysterically, barely able to breathe from my panic attack, he insisted that since he has my favorite food, I'll be fine. I got in my car and bolted. Sat in a grocery store parking lot cause I was so scared he'd find me if I went to a friend's or a relative's. I called my mom. Once I calmed down enough, I went to a police station and got a temporary restraining order. In court, the judge decided I didn't qualify for a permanent restraining order, because, even though he admitted to all his behavior, and it qualified legally as domestic violence on multiple levels, the lack of physical violence means I don't qualify for a permanent restraining order. So essentially he needs to hurt me before I can prevent him from hurting me. 3 days after court he messaged me again. He's made fake Facebook accounts, messaged me on absolutely every platform he could think of. My girlfriend stopped smoking Zaza and turned into Satan. My girlfriend has been smoking grass for 10 years. Chronically and daily for about 6 of those years. Her preferred method and what gets her the most baked is her bowl. She has an 18-incher that she likes to pack with what she calls popper bowls, which is essentially grinded up grass mixed in with tobacco. She claims this method gets her the most buzzed and gives her a nice little head spin, so that's why she prefers to smoke that way. Her routine would go as follows. She will work 7 to 3, get home around 3:30, shower, and immediately smoke. This, coupled with work, leaves her exhausted and she falls asleep. Without fail, every time. I will not hear from her from anywhere between 4 to 6 hours. Wakes up around 9 to 10 p.m. or so, stays the night with me, and then it's back to work the next morning. Recently my girlfriend has come to me in a very serious manner, that she has been thinking about it a lot and truly wants to stop, or at least cut back immensely. She claims she wants to break out of this routine and that years of smoking have also affected her health. I wanted to back her up fully even though I am a toker myself. She had my full support 100%. I was actually even proud of her for taking the initiative, and still am. She is on day 5 and life has been effing hell since. My girlfriend went from the most loving, laid back and calm person to just straight up the opposite. She is short, snappy and rude on a good day. Downright insulting and a menace to me on a bad one. She has become hyper aware of herself now that she's not cookied 24/7, and has become incredibly insecure as a result. She is angry all of the time. She has turned critical of everything I do and say. Every time I ask her if there's anything I can do to help or comfort her, she just screams that she wants to smoke. She cries after work now. I have been trying to get her to look into some hobbies, to fill that time void after work she would otherwise be using to smoke and sleep, but she just claims she has no interests or doesn't know what they are. She is just apathetic to everything at this point. My best friend traded me for my bully. I, 21, have a girl, let's call her Priscilla 22, I consider to be my best friend for the last 3 years. Priscilla has seen me go through a lot. Especially after my family disowned me for not forgiving my cousin for hooking up with my then girlfriend 4 years ago. Priscilla was the one to help me through all that, and I genuinely thought she was someone who would never hurt me. But here I am. Last night she was hanging around my apartment and we were drinking. She is not good with it, so she got loose and admitted to being in a relationship with my high school bully. She started gushing about him, how good of a man he was. All of us were in the same class, so she knows the kind of things Mitch, 22, I think, has done to me. Especially after my family disowned me, he got even meaner as my cousin was a part of his group. He and his gang of lackeys always physically and mentally abused me. I filed a complaint with the school, but we all know how helpful they are in these cases. Moreover, since I did not have my parents by my side, nothing was done to them and my life was made even more hellish. Priscilla was the only one who kept me together as I started living with her parents after I was disowned. So she knows firsthand what kind of torment Mitch put me through. Back to the topic. I don't think she immediately realized what she had admitted to and went to sleep in my spare bedroom. I was too shocked to sleep, so I went to stay with a college friend. Priscilla must have realized what she confessed to last night and has since been bombarding my phone with calls and texts. My friend took my phone away and I am using his phone to type this post. Apologies for any mistakes. I am honestly thinking of cutting her out of my life at this point. Priscilla means a lot to me, but I just can't be around her anymore. But I don't know whether I'm being unreasonable here. Can someone help me? My best friend traded me for my bully. I went to talk with Priscilla the next day to get to know her side. I did not go alone. I had a couple of my college friends with me. I didn't know what I was thinking or feeling back when I entered the cafe we were supposed to meet in. But when I saw her, it felt as if she had been crying for the entire night. As Priscilla saw me walking towards her, she got up to hug me, but I gently pushed her away. I could see she was hurt, but so was I. My buddies took seats over at the next table, and Priscilla and I got to talking. She could barely form any sentences as she kept apologizing. I told her to stop crying as gently as I could, and she finally started telling her side of the story to me. Well, they had not been dating for 3 months, but for a year. Yup. For a year she had been lying to me. And then came the line which most of you said she would. Priscilla, he has changed a lot. You should meet him. Me? Really? You're going to say that to me after all he has done? I still have scars from what he did to me, you know this, don't you? Why were you talking to him in the first place? Priscilla, he wanted to apologize to you for all he did but didn't have the courage to. From then on the conversation went in circles. He wanted to apologize, the two of them got to talking and all. But she did not have the answer for my one question, why him? At this point, someone walked over to us and sat beside her. Any guesses who it was? Yup. It was my bully, let's call him Mitch. I don't clearly remember what happened afterwards, but there was a lot of yelling and then Mitch snapped and tried to punch me for making his girl cry. Priscilla was watching it all. I wasn't in the right mind, so the punch hit me. My friends rushed over, but before they could do anything I knocked Mitch down. Back in high school I used to be small and weak. But in the last couple of years I have grown a lot, both in height and weight. Thankfully my friends stopped me before I did something that would have made me regret it later on. Priscilla was crying all the while, but not once did she try to check on me. At that moment I knew our friendship was over. I looked at her for one last time and told her, too much for a change, don't you think? After that, my friends and I walked out of the cafe. It was then all the rush and anger I had disappeared and I started bawling like I was back in high school. Not proud of it, but my friends helped me immensely. The days following the meet were tiring as I was busy moving in with my friends. The apartment I was living in belonged to Priscilla's parents, so I didn't think it was right for me to continue living there. However, before leaving I called them and told them about the fight and stuff and that I was moving out. They were surprised and reassured me that their daughter will not cause me any issues. But I declined. I was living there while paying minimum rent to them, and I did not think it would be a good idea for me to live somewhere Priscilla could find me. I thanked them for all they had done for me over the last few years and reassured them our relationship was still the same. I could feel it was tough for all of us, but this farewell was necessary. So here I am, living with my college friends who also celebrated my birthday last night. It was an awesome party and completely unexpected too. After all, in all this mess I forgot about my birthday for the first time in life. On my birthday, Priscilla tried to call and text me. But I didn't reply to or see her texts. So that's all, I think. I'm still sad about losing my best friend, but I know this is the best for both of us. On a positive note though, I was informed that I have been selected for a student exchange program, so if the virus allows it, I'll be moving to Singapore in a couple of months. I abandoned my girlfriend because I thought she cheated on me. 4 years later she married my best friend and I discovered that she never cheated on me. I really think more people should call cheating what is it? Abuse, emotional abuse. I had a girlfriend for 8 years until I turned 21. She cheated on me several times and even got pregnant by someone else. Despite that, I kept trying to get her back, even offering to help with the child. But she ended up marrying the father of her child because her family made her do it. I felt really sad about it and went through a really traumatizing time. I lost my job and got very depressed. My best friend, Roberto, helped me find a new job and get back on my feet. When I was 23, I met Sienna, and we started dating. At first, I was a bit controlling and always wanted to know where she was. But Sienna told me I needed to trust her and helped me deal with my issues. We went to therapy together, and our relationship got better. We moved in together and had 6 happy years together. One night, when I was working late, Sienna went out with Roberto and some friends. When I got home, I found out Sienna's phone was turned off, and Roberto sent me a picture of Sienna in bed with another guy. I was devastated and told Sienna to leave. For weeks, I avoided everyone who mentioned Sienna and eventually moved to another state. I stopped trying to have romantic relationships because I felt so hurt. Recently, I reconnected with Roberto on Facebook and found out he had married Sienna a year ago. I talked to a friend who knew Roberto, and he told me something I didn't know. The night I found Sienna with another guy, she had been really intoxicated, and that guy took advantage of her. Sienna went through a hard time and tried to contact me but couldn't find me. She also found out she was pregnant but sadly lost the baby. Roberto supported her during this tough period, and they eventually started dating and got married. Sienna is now pregnant. Again. I feel really guilty for leaving Sienna when she needed help. I still love her, and I'm not sure what to do next. Should I talk to Roberto or Sienna about how I feel? I'm dating my sister's bully, but I think my sister is blowing it out of proportion. My younger sister Anne had a bully in high school named Andrea. It started off as mostly name-calling, and then became physical. My sister would come home with bruises sometimes, and the school did nothing about it. I always supported Anne through it. By the time they got out of high school I still absolutely hated Andrea. Then 2 years ago I met her at a local cafe where she started working. She ended up apologizing to me for how she treated my sister. She'd been wanting to apologize to Anne but she had no way of contacting her. I still kept my guard up when I saw her after that, but I felt like she'd really matured since high school and told my sister about her. Anne wasn't interested in any apologies, which I get, but I decided to try convince Anne that Andrea has changed and maybe they could even be friends. I kept talking to Andrea and she asked me out on a date after a few months. I figured my sister would be happy for me, regardless of her and Andrea's past. Either way, I never told Anne. Our first date went really well and I was falling more and more for her. She's everything I would ever want from a girl and is no longer a bully. Throughout that time I kept our relationship a secret from Anne and our family, aside from dropping little hints that Andrea's changed. The only people who knew were our closest friends. Then when I was confident I really wanted to be with Andrea, I told my parents first, who were shocked but were willing to meet her, then and who told me she'd disown me if I brought Andrea home. I didn't take her seriously since I did so much for her and thought she could put her feelings aside just this one time. We set up a date for Andrea to meet my family and aside from Anne not showing up it went really well and my parents warmed up to her. So everything was going well until one day Anne went off on me, said some truly awful things and threatened to go no contact with me and my parents if I didn't break up with Andrea, and they kept her out of our house. No matter how much I begged her to give Andrea a chance she kept bashing my relationship. Our parents took her side and I had enough of the BS, so I told them they could accept my relationship or I'd distance myself from them. Mom took the first option and my dad and Anne took the second. I don't see or talk to Anne anymore, barely see my dad, and my mom's constantly heartbroken that our family will never be whole again, all because Anne is too selfish to accept that people can change. F Anna, I really don't need her, I have Andrea.
My high school crush is telling people I'm the one that got away despite actively rejecting me for 2 years to preserve his ego. I want to get this off my chest once, and then I'm done. Just to preface this, I have a partner currently that I have been dating for around 4 years now. We are both seniors in college, and I am incredibly happy with him. He's the love of my life, and I'm so happy that I got over my crush when I did, so that I got to meet my partner, befriend them, and pursue a meaningful relationship. My issue is that when I was interested in him, he entertained it heavily. We would be on the phone for hours every single day. At first, he was my best friend, we were inseparable, we did everything together, and I started falling for him after we almost kissed in my car. I tried to force it down, I tried to just stay friends with him, but I felt guilty for hiding my feelings and I told him. When I told him, he said that I was like a sister to him, which I was totally fine with after my initial sadness. I still kind of liked him, but I was so happy that I got to keep my best friend. After a while, I started branching out and trying to find new people. I would talk to him about these people and he would encourage it over text, so I thought everything was totally normal. Then, I met a guy at a party with our friend group and was really hitting it off with him. The entire night, he avoided me, and I found out later from our friends that he was super jealous and angry that I was talking to that guy. Well, this continued for the next several months. I would meet people, flirt for a bit, I even had a few dates, and every single time, he would get angry. He would criticize every single boyfriend or girlfriend that I had, talk about how jealous and mad he was to our friends, and so I finally confronted him on why he was acting this way. He said he was just being protective, but I knew that was bull. I asked him if he liked me and said that was the last time I was ever going to ask. He said no, so I moved on completely. Our contact fizzled out after a while, and that's when I met my current partner. When the two of us met, there was an instant connection. We became close friends really quickly, and our friendship blossomed into a romance within a few months, and we have been inseparable ever since. We did break up briefly due to some mental health/physical health issues I was having, and that's when my crush came out of the woodwork and started speaking to me again. He heard about my breakup, and he said he wanted to help talk me through it. I knew that I was still in love with and planning to get back with my partner, but since I figured it had been long enough since the two of us liked each other, I didn't see the harm in hanging out in public as friends. So, that's what we did. He helped talk me through the breakup, gave me really good advice, but one day while he was driving me home, he stopped the car. He looked at me and said, "I'm sorry, I can't pretend like this isn't killing me." I asked him what he meant, and he said that he didn't know. He then reached over and cupped my face in his hands, sighed, and then kept driving. I was really confused. I got back home, and saw that he blocked me. Fast forward a few months, my partner and I got back together. We went to some couples counseling, talked it through, and decided that we were both ready to give it another shot. We went to a party with the same friend group for the first time back together as an official couple. Nobody in the group had heard from my crush in almost 2 months at this point, so I didn't expect that he would be there, and lo and behold, there he was. I came upstairs first. He lit up when he saw me and picked me up and spun me around and started talking to me enthusiastically. I was confused, but didn't have time to react before I saw his face fall as soon as my boyfriend walked up the stairs. He looked at me, then at him, and then stormed out of the house. That was the last time I spoke to him. Now, present day. It's 4 years and counting with my amazing boyfriend, and last week I began receiving messages on Instagram and Twitter from my former friend group. As I said, I grilled one of them for information, and it turns out my former crush has been telling people that he regrets not snatching me up the second he got the chance, that I'm the one that got away, that he misses me, that he always loved me, and that he wants to be with me. The reason that this infuriates me is because he had his chance to have me. I was in love with him for 2 years, gave him multiple chances, but he wasn't interested/rejected me every single time. Now, it's too little too late. I feel nothing for him anymore. I haven't thought about him once until these messages started popping up, but now all I can feel is overwhelming anger. He's trying to come back into my life now that I am unbelievably happy, successful, and with someone who I love more than anyone or anything. Does he really expect me to just drop the best thing that's ever happened to me and come running into his arms? If I was that same pathetic 15-year-old girl, maybe I would have, but I'm a 22-year-old woman now. I know that I live in his head as some idealized version of myself that is still obsessed with him, but that isn't me anymore. His friends are trying to convince me to just talk to him, but I absolutely will not be doing that. My partner has supported me in all of this, and he even said that if I want to go talk to him for some closure, I should. But I don't need closure. He indirectly admitted that he always loved me, but that he was too much of a wuss to be with me back then. I'm happy with my situation, and there isn't a single part of me that's wondering what could have been anymore. Instead of talking to me directly, he knows where I live, he knows how to reach me, he could talk to me if he wanted to. He sent his little boyfriends out to convince me to talk to him. He's still just as immature, and I'm not. If you're reading this, the answer is no, and that answer will never change. I wish you the best in life, but I want you to stay out of mine. That's all I've got. Thanks for reading.
My ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend can't seem to get over me, so I dated a girl long distance for a year back in 2010. We broke up rather quietly, or so I thought. Her new boyfriend, now her husband, called me about a month later telling me that she had been seeing him behind my back and that she never really loved me, etc. Personally, I laughed it off. I knew the relationship wasn't going anywhere and I had been looking for an easy out for months. Being long distance made it much easier, but apparently it made him feel good about himself. Fast forward a few years, they're married and he's traveling for work, which included a layover in my city. He posted something about me from the airport and tagged a mutual friend of mine, so I saw the post. Something along the lines of "Mr. Steal your girl back in your city." I know it was about me because the friend he tagged asked what he was talking about and he mentioned me. Apparently he has made several posts like this, both before and after I saw this one. I haven't seen or talked to either my ex or him since about a month after calling me years ago, during which there were several petty interactions. However, the fact that I was still on his mind after a few years, thinking that he had won some sort of competition against me, got my petty revenge thoughts brewing. I mean, he thinks it is a petty competition, so why not step up to the plate and take a few, metaphorical, swings? On this occurrence, I looked through his socials and noticed they were living in my ex's house, so I knew the address. I also knew that you can sign people up to be visited by Jehovah's Witnesses. Fast forward another few months, there's a new post about him having to deal with JWs coming to his door 8 times in a day for a month. Cops, what is the saddest thing a criminal has said? I volunteered to implement self-improvement talks within a juvenile correctional facility in Mexico. I met a 16-year-old boy who was in jail for taking a life. He was a thin boy, dark-skinned, not very tall but not short either, very polite. He didn't say many bad words and his friends described him as very hardworking and very friendly. What I am describing to you is so that you feel a little what I felt at that moment. He told me that his father was drinking a lot, and when he drank he hurt him and his brothers and sisters. The father would force himself onto his mother. This situation was getting worse because it was more and more constant the days that his father arrived intoxicated. But the worst was when he started mixing hardcore substances. In his words, they were the worst moments of his life, the most violent thing he has ever seen. The question I asked him is, how did you end up here? And he didn't speak for a few minutes and I saw how tears fell. But after gathering courage he told me the following. One day my father arrived intoxicated as usual, and hit us as usual, but something clicked in my head when I heard the screams of my little brothers and my mom. I had to do something. So I took a knife from the kitchen and waited for him to fall asleep. I remember that I didn't have to wait long. I stood in front of him and watched him for a few seconds. I finally got the strength to end him there and then. He got up before I could wound him again but didn't last much longer. At that moment everyone got up from from their beds and saw what happened, and my mom was crying and yelling at me, why? But at the same time she hugged me and we cried together until the police arrived. My mother turned herself into the police saying that she was the one who took the life of her husband, but I told them the truth. They locked us both up, but when they did the investigation they released my mother. And that's how I ended up here. My wife insisted we try an open marriage. Now she hates it because I sleep with females more attractive than her. My wife of 10 years has been raising the topic of wanting to have an open marriage for years. 2 months ago I agreed to give it a try for 6 months. A few days later she had her first casual encounter with a man in his late 20s from her gym. And with my full knowledge, I was expecting to have a tough time with it, but as she clearly enjoyed it and enthusiastically kept me in the loop, it was easier to take than I expected. I began looking around on dating apps. We live in a college town, and somewhat to my surprise, after swiping liberally, I found myself matching with a number of women in the 16 to 20 age range. These include a few who I found extremely attractive. Now, I'm considered fairly good looking and I do keep in shape, but I was still not expecting these matches to go anywhere. Again, to my surprise, several of these women expressed interest via chat and meeting up for intimate encounters. I am not going to lie, as a man who married during my prime, the idea of sleeping with beautiful younger women has a strong draw. And so I did, keeping my wife in the loop as she was with me. From the start though, she seemed put off. Isn't she a bit young for you? She could be your daughter and so on. Still she accepted it, and over the past few months I've ended up sleeping with 7 different females, most of them more than once, and 2 of them regularly. I'm having a blast, but my wife is seeming more and more bothered by the situation, sometimes acting disgusted and not speaking to me for hours after I come home from a hookup. To be fair, I get it, but this was something she wanted and I'm playing well within the rules. And while I value our marriage, I don't want to stop until our agreed 6 months is up. I harshly told my sister why she's not the next guardian of our baby if something happens to me, and she got upset. My husband and I recently had our first child. After IVF treatments, thousands and thousands of fertility, and a few miscarriages, we had her. Our family is proud and it's just such a blessing to have her. Our family, my mom and dad and my 2 sisters and their SOs and kids, gather every other Sunday for lunch where grandma cooks and everyone can relax and the kids can play. I was holding my daughter when business came up. Me and my husband own a business and insurance, and ect. My parents are the beneficials if something ever happened, God forbid. My husband has disavowed his family since he was 16, so it's just my side. One of my sisters, let's call her Kay, suddenly said, "That's weird. Why are our parents the ones to inherit money if something happened to us when they are older and retired, have their money, while she is struggling to pay her bills?" Kay has been engaged for the last 11 years to a man that's 25 years her senior and is very odd. She'd had 5 kids with him. She and her family get evicted yearly due to the damage they do to the apartments and are overall struggling. In my opinion, something that they do to themselves. She refuses to work and allows her kids to rampage. She's also recently gotten in trouble legally because she was selling her food stamps for cash and was caught. I immediately tried to change the subject, but my mom didn't notice and said, "Well, now with the baby, if anything happens, we'll adopt her and the business." My sister snapped and demanded why she wouldn't be the next in line to raise the baby, in the event of me and my husband's death. I tried to change the subject again. She demanded why we trust our 70-year-old parents with a baby over her, an experienced mother. I snapped too. I told her how she's getting evicted every 6 months. How every time she thinks her boyfriend is about to leave her she gets pregnant. Years ago, she had a CPS case opened against her for leaving 2 of her toddlers in a running car at a gas station. I had some low blows, I admit. Her kids are always dirty. Snot down their faces, knotted hair. Their teeth are rotting out of their heads. She gathered her kids and left. My other sister sent a not cool text, and my family had 2 members that died in 9/11, and we have a family gathering every year, so my parents are asking me to apologize and put this behind us so we can focus on that tomorrow. No. I'm sick of it. She's calling out my new parenting when she's barely hanging on? She used to drop her kids off on our doorstep, barely clothed, and then return the next morning. And she's upset. I don't want to give her guardianship if my husband's death happens.
Sexist mother-in-law is demanding we lock up our daughter and throw away the key when she turns 16. When my husband and I's parents found out I was pregnant at 16, they weren't pleased. We were grounded for months. I could only see my friends at school, and my husband and I weren't allowed to interact at all without any of our parents present. Luckily, they eventually accepted this was happening, and they've turned out to be pretty good grandparents, but mother-in-law can still be a piece of work. She sometimes oversteps, but she usually gets back in line with just a look from my husband or I. When she doesn't, she's quickly and brutally smacked down, which usually shoves her back in her lane. One of the places we clash with mother-in-law is how we raise our kids. We believe ruling your children with an iron fist just makes them grow up to be crushed adults, so my husband and I are very chill and give our kids a lot of freedom. We agreed when I was pregnant with our son that we'd start with don't break the law and don't be a dickhead to anyone, and we'd add more rules as needed. We've only had to add one rule: hang up your wet towels in the bathroom. That one was added when our son went for a swim and accidentally started a penicillin farm with a wet beach towel in his bedroom. We had to replace the carpet. Some people have called us lazy and irresponsible parents, but our kids are independent, happy, and actually talk to us about their lives, so I think we've done the right thing for our kids. Anyway, back to how mother-in-law is currently being a rabbit beach. Our daughter turns 16 next year, and mother-in-law has ramped up, insisting my husband and I start to enforce ridiculous rules to protect her from Wombat's mistakes, because apparently I'm the Virgin Mary and my husband wasn't involved in the creation of our son at all. Her rules are: a curfew of 6 p.m., make her quit gymnastics, not allowing her to wear any figure-hugging clothing, Ban all boys and men under the age of 25 who aren't her brother from our house. This includes our kids' friends and their cousins. Make her change to an all-girls school. Mother-in-law even set up a phone interview for a very exclusive all-girls school without us knowing. My husband and I were very confused when he got the call. We're so super pissed off at the double standard. When our son turned 16, mother-in-law didn't make a peep about preventing him from getting a girl pregnant, which makes no sense since my daughter can get pregnant once a year, but my son can impregnate multiple girls in weeks. It's such a SHT, boys will be boys, girls will be controlled mentality, and it infuriates us. My husband and I kept telling mother-in-law to F off, but the phone interview was the final straw, so we've blocked her everywhere and gone no contact with her over it. We also told the kids what mother-in-law was doing and said we weren't going to make them cut her off. They're old enough and more than sassy enough to handle her, but they ultimately both chose to block her as well. When we told the kids, our son was more pissed off than our daughter. He wanted to go to mother-in-law's house and give her a piece of his mind on the sexism bullshit. Our daughter just thought the idea of mother-in-law trying to control my husband and I was hilarious.
Ladies, what's the worst thing you've done to a girl? In 5th grade, I pushed a girl in a monkey cage enclosure and the monkey ripped the skin of her arms off. I attended an elementary school that is near a small park where there were about 10 exotic animals like hawks, snakes and monkeys. It's basically a small zoo. We usually waited there for our school bus to arrive. We were just sitting around the birdcage-like enclosure of this aggressive monkey that we're making fun of and waiting for the school bus to arrive. When the bus arrived, we all stood up and raced to the bus. All of us kids used to race to the bus because we all wanted to get good seats. As I'm running, I see everyone is getting ahead of me. I knew that I wouldn't be first, so I pushed the girl who was in front of me. As soon as I pushed her, a worker just so happened to open up one of the gates to the cage to feed the monkey. The girl I pushed tripped, rolled, and landed inside the cage. The monkey got startled and went crazy instantly. The monkey grabbed her arm and ripped her skin off in one bite. It is the gnarliest thing I have ever seen. Her face turned pale white, I think because of the shock and loss of blood. We carried her out of the park while she and some of us were stained with blood. An old guy who was working in the park saw us and immediately carried her and called an ambulance. The day after that, the monkey is not in the park anymore and the girl was transferred out of the school. Apparently her parents didn't want their daughter attending a school where they put a bus stop close to a zoo with dangerous animals. The last time I saw the girl, she had a terrifying scar on her arm. For some reason I never got in trouble for what I did. Everyone just assumed she tripped and rolled over there on her own. Guys, what's the most down bad you have ever been? I started talking to this girl one night after she messaged me through social media. We began talking about common interests with subtle flirting here and there. The following day I asked her to send a photo of herself. She proceeded to send 4 pictures, 2 of which she was in baggy clothing, the other 2 being top angles. All of these photos had 2 things in common. All had filters, and all hid what everything below her neck looked like. I instantly suspected she was a beluga. After talking for a little while, our conversation shifted to a more intimate context. She told me about some of her fantasies, such as getting tied down and tickled. I refused to follow through with that one but told her I'd fulfill some of her other ones. We made a plan for her to sneak over while my parents were out of my house the next day. Well, the next day rolls around and we talk about her coming over, which she later does. After waiting an hour for her bus to get to my house, I waited outside so she knew which house was mine. As she walks to my driveway, I noticed something about her. Not only was she hiding her body for good reason, but she was also very unattractive in person. Maybe a solid 2 out of 10. To put the cherry on top of the cake, she smelled like a mix of body odor and cigarettes. Me, not wanting to be rude as she had just traveled across town to do the devil's tango, walked her into my house and to my room. We put on a show on Netflix and began following through with what we had previously talked about, excluding the tickling. After finishing up what was and will be my worst intimate experience ever, we both just sat there. The post-nut was crazy. I actually went into my bathroom and took a long and hard look at myself in the mirror. I'm pretty sure a tear even streamed down my eye. I came back out and sat down. I sat there thinking about how I could get her out of my house without being rude. I finished a glass of water and said I was going to go fill it. I quickly pulled out my phone and bribed my sister to come knock on my door and tell me my parents were home early and that they needed me to help them unload groceries. I told her I was sorry and that I needed to go help. I told her to take the next bus, which was 20 minutes later. For the next 2 hours I sat there smelling like her and deeply regretting everything I'd just done. This inspired me to go do household chores to keep my mind off of what happened. My wife hates my female best friend. I have a friend called Sarah who I've known since childhood and has been there for me my whole life. I owe her my life and she's always been my go-to when I've problems. We slept once when we were in high school, but that's all. My wife has never liked Sarah since I had her as best woman at my wedding. She calls her a pick-me. She went as far to suggest I cut her out of my life when she became pregnant with her first child, but we worked through it in couples therapy. Their relationship got better when Sarah got married last year, but unfortunately Sarah's husband just up and left a pregnant Sarah, which has made her mental health spiral. Since Sarah has always been there for me, I've stepped up for her by taking her to appointments, building the nursery and even promising to be with her when she gives birth. My wife has become extremely hostile to Sarah, which has caused fights. To make up for not being there as much as I should, I planned a special birthday for my wife. It was going to be a whole day and night being treated like a celebrity with a fancy hotel, dinner in an expensive restaurant, a shopping trip and a spa. Unfortunately, the same day Sarah went into labor 6 weeks early. She rang me in a bad state begging me to come to the hospital because she was scared. I told my wife everything and she started to freak out and saying it was her day, that Sarah wasn't going to ruin it. I told her to stop being childish. We can celebrate another time, or she could ask a friend to go. Then she told me to not come home without a paternity test for Sarah's child. I'm currently with Sarah in the delivery ward. I've been getting so many angry calls and texts from both our families and friends. Unfortunately, I tried getting in touch with my wife, but I'm blocked on everything. Edit. Hi Warren, this is your wife Ella. First off, Sarah doesn't have a husband because she cheated on him and doesn't know who the dad is. Even your own parents think it is you. Sarah has no friends because she's rude to all the women in your life for no reason. She has slept with or flirted with multiple male member of your friend group. Your male friend group passes her around like a cigarette. I'm currently out at nice restaurant with your mom and sister while your dad boxes up stuff to take to Sarah's. I want a divorce and Sarah to be finally out of my life. Entitled mom is upset that I did my job, and now my boss is threatening me. I'm a manager of a before and after school child care program in my local public school district. The company that I work for is privately owned, and sort of rents out the space in the schools. I've just passed my 7th year working here, started when I was 15, and I've always really liked it, mainly because the school that I've been working at is the school that I went to as a kid, and it's within close walking distance. Working at that specific school is one of the main reasons that I've worked here for so long. When I became the manager, it was literally something that was just forced upon me, because there was no one else to fill that role. I've always been really good at saving, so I've never asked for a raise before. I've spent my own money buying toys and supplies for the site that the higher-ups either didn't want to get or didn't know what to get. I've been shortened on support staff for my site for the 2nd straight year, as they do not want to pay a competing starting wage with other nearby businesses. But, whatever, working with children, K-5, takes a lot out of you, but you do it for them. I've always really liked my job, but the past couple of days are making me change my mind. So there I was, opening, understaffed, with 2 staff out on vacation, 1 not showing, and 2 others coming nearly 30 minutes after school gets out because they're both high schoolers, and have to commute, drop off siblings, and whatever. Shortly after school gets out, I usually take the kids to the playground. It's one of the largest playgrounds in the district, despite being one of the smallest schools. So I'm practically solo monitoring 45 kids, because 1 staff has to stand at the entrance to the playground, and then a hill and the equipment get in the way. Then I heard a lot of yelling that one of the 1st grade girls is crying. When I get over there, the 1st grader is under some stairs crying. And I start my questioning. The 1st grader in question has some mobility disability, required a walker to get around, and had multiple surgeries over the summer to help. Turns out that a new kid in the program this year, a 3rd grade boy, had pushed her down, kept pushing her down, pinned her to the ground and grabbed her neck. When I asked the 3rd grader why he did this, he said I don't know. When I asked if there was a reason why he did this, he said no. In response, I had him apologize to the 1st grader, and walk 3 laps around the blacktop, and of course I wrote up a behavior report for him to give to his parents. All pretty normal, until I get a text from my boss if I could come into the company office to talk. Apparently, the mom of the 3rd grader had called my boss and the principal of the school and had a multi-hour conversation about how I was being biased and unfair to her kid. She demanded that I be removed from the site, and my boss, for some reason, immediately caved and said that I can pick the school that I wanted to change. So, I'm essentially being demoted, told I have to spend a lot more on commuting, be moved with no advanced warning, and cause the site that I have spent so much effort on to have no manager, for the horrible crime of doing my job. What was the final straw that made you cut your narcissistic parents out of your life? It was Christmas and we were all at my sister's house sitting around and chatting when my narcissistic dad saw me looking down at my phone. I had just paid my phone bill and was browsing the phones they had for the upgraded option. I wasn't looking to upgrade, just curious about prices because it had been a bit since I looked. My dad starts drilling me about spending money on an expensive phone, which turns into him ranting about all of my perceived failures. I tell him I wasn't looking at them with any intention of making a purchase. Didn't matter though, he was on a roll. He went from the phone rant into a rant about how this shows I'm not a good mother. Starts saying that by leaving my ex and splitting custody of our kids that I was abandoning my children. Told me I should lose custody of my kids because I let myself have depression and anxiety and because of my past issues with alcohol. Then said I was part of the reason there is a housing crisis in the US. That's because women like me decided to work instead of staying at home with the kids all day, that now they leave their husbands because they can afford to. And instead of 1 household it becomes 2, therefore housing crisis. At that point I was done with him. It was painfully clear that he defined me by my lowest moments, using times I was vulnerable as a weapon to mock and humiliate me. I don't know why it took so long for me to see it, but I'm glad it happened in a weird way. It was the slap in the face I needed to see him for who he really was.
What's a secret you won't share with anyone in person but you are willing to share anonymously? I'm the reason my cousin is mentally handicapped. We are the same age, and when we were 7 our grandpa bought dirt bikes for us. Well, we decided to make our own trail in the woods, took the entire summer. I put this tree branch purposely at roughly head level, just so he could duck under it and it would look awesome. The branch was heavy, but I was able to sit it conveniently between 2 trees. He was more brave than me, so he went first. Being dumb kids, we didn't wear helmets. I yelled for him to duck, but he didn't and hit his head on the branch, got knocked backwards and hit his head again straight into the ground. I told everyone it was an accident. Grandpa sold the dirt bikes. I didn't see my cousin a whole lot after that. That was nearly 25 years ago. I see him every Christmas, and it's always the same. In a wheelchair, being spoon-fed by his mom. He can't speak, he likes to draw funny shapes. He most likely doesn't remember the incident, and I don't know if he remembers me, but that's what haunts me.
The original owners of my dog tried to take him back and I'm traumatized. My husband and I adopted a dog. Upon discovering that he has severe anxiety, we haven't left him alone. He goes to daycare while my partner or I are at work. We engage in weekend activities and walk him after dinner each night. We don't even dine out unless we can bring him along and sit outside. In my opinion, we are decent owners. He is currently in training and on medication for separation anxiety. Recently, we went semi-viral for a post. I won't delve into specifics for privacy reasons. My account was tagged, and shortly after, I received a direct message. The user, let's call her Karen, explained how she found me, and after stalking my profile, she realized we lived in the same county. Apparently, she and her husband used to work remotely but were soon required to return to the office. The dog was left in the crate and eventually began to destroy it. When he broke free, he wrecked their apartment. Karen went on to say that she is back to being a remote worker and would now like to reclaim the dog, having time for him. She sent pictures of him to substantiate her claims. I responded that they made the correct decision, understanding they didn't have the necessary time or resources, but I'm not a foster parent. I adopted this dog, and he's mine. I told her I'm sorry she regrets giving him up, but dogs are lifelong commitments, and I'm not going to return him just because she, and I quote, had him first. She then told me what a horrible person I was and how she had had the dog since he was 8 weeks old, and she's practically the only mother he's ever known. I once again declined and eventually blocked her. 2 weeks passed, and I was home alone with the dog when I heard someone jiggle the door handle, followed by pounding on my door. I saw a man on the camera. I asked him what he wanted, through our security app, and he demanded I open the door. The dog followed me into our back bedroom, where I locked the door and grabbed my husband's firearm. Still on the app, I told him I was armed and would use the weapon if anyone attempted to enter the house. He needed to leave immediately, and I was contacting the police. He just kept shouting, "Open the door, you effing beach. I know who you are, OP." I felt physically sick. He knew my name. I called 911 and texted my husband to rush home. I informed the operator I was 14 weeks pregnant, and someone was attempting to break into my house, but I was armed. For 5 minutes, he continued to hammer on my front door. I kept an eye on the app to ensure he hadn't broken in yet. Those were the longest 5 minutes of my life. The police arrived shortly before my husband. I watched the entire incident on my phone, hearing my husband screaming, "Where's my wife?" The police pulled the guy aside, and he claimed that we had stolen his mother's dog. The dog, the effing dog. I had grown paranoid after listening to a true crime episode about a woman cutting a baby out of another woman's belly. The police informed him that this was a civil matter, but trespassing was not. When asked if we wanted to press charges, we said yes. I'm still shaken by how he figured out where we lived. Was I being stalked? Since then, I've changed all my social media handles and am now waiting to see what happens next. My husband is forcing me to wear a red dress on our wedding day because I don't have my V card. I've been with my fiancé for 6 years and engaged for the past 8 months. I've been doing most of the wedding planning, but my fiancé Ryan will give his input here and there. About a month ago, Ryan out of nowhere said he was talking to some of his coworkers and thinks that I shouldn't wear a white dress. This was totally weird to me. Ryan is a very artistic guy, so I figured this was more about how the photos would turn out or something along those lines, but I'm set on wearing white. I told him this and I could see that he was annoyed, but he let it go. 2 weeks ago I finally picked and paid for my dress, and this caused a huge argument. Ryan again came to me very annoyed. He asked to see the dress I picked, but I said no because I wanted it to be a surprise for our wedding day. He asked me to at least tell him what color it was, and when I said white, he threw a fit. I honestly do not see why this was a big deal. Almost everyone wears white on their wedding day. When I asked him what color he thought I'd be wearing, he told me I should wear red. Again, this was super weird to me. I asked him why I would wear red to our wedding, and he told me that brides only wear white when they are pure. For some background, Ryan and I started dating when I was 21 and he just turned 20. He had his V card when we met, and I told him that I only had one other person who was my ex-boyfriend of 4 years throughout high school. Even this caused a lot of problems the first year of our relationship, and we almost did not continue dating because of how insecure he felt. After that first year, it was never a problem again until now, I guess. He went to his mom about all of this thinking she would convince me, but she's on my side. So 2 nights ago, Ryan, his mom and I stood in our living room and argued about my intimate life being shown in a dress. His mom stated that he no longer has his V card either, so maybe he should wear red too, and he burst out crying. Ryan is still stating that me wearing white would be deceiving all of the guests and that it is different for guys. This all has honestly made me question even marrying this man. I don't know if it's just because everything is so fresh, but I'm really disgusted by him. He's not even religious, so I know this is just about him still thinking about me losing my V card before I even knew him. He returned home from work a couple of days later in absolute rage and mentioned the name of a colleague that had started in the company the previous week. As it turns out, this colleague was a teenage boyfriend of mine, and the boy I had lost my V card to at 16, and it had all come out in conversation over lunch. My fiancé was livid and we argued so much that in a temper I ran upstairs and grabbed the wedding dress and grabbed a bottle of red food coloring, poured it all over the dress and screamed, "You can give this to your next girl for her wedding day." We have not spoken since.
When did your bowels betray in the worst possible way? When I was 17, my girlfriend was finally ready to lose her V card. I was overjoyed. Neither Hades nor high water was going to stand between me and my final destination. I get ready for the night, trim everything up and shower extra well. Unfortunately, there was another issue. I have a digestional disorder that sometimes causes my poop to become extremely large and rock solid while still inside me. I wasn't aware it was a treatable problem and in fact just thought everyone had to deal with the equivalent of rectal kidney stones. So one night, her parents are away. We have her entire house to ourselves. She was always a little experimental, so she demanded we do the deed on her parents' bed. I arrive at her house and walk into a maze of candles. She's been working on this all day apparently. And it's as bright as high noon in there with the lights off. Which is good because she proceeds to do a sweet, seductive little dance for me. At 16, she was amazing. For those of you who have never experienced a female at that age, I pity you. Now I'm sitting on the bed watching this dance. I smile and tell her how good she looks. Unfortunately, most of my attention is focused on the dull throbbing from my sphincter and a large amount of intestinal discomfort associated with not dropping a deuce in days. But somehow I still get it up and we go to town. She starts out on top, then we switch. I bent her over the bed and I even smack her butt, which was a ballsy move at the time, but she loved it. Due to the built-up fecal matter lodged in my rectum, I last for what seems like forever. She can't stop moaning and telling me how good it feels. And then she says what every man wants to hear. I want to make you go in my mouth. So she goes down on me. She was always average at best in the head department, but at least she tried. She pops my joystick out of her mouth long enough to look up at me and say, "Tell me if you like this." She jammed her finger deep inside my bum. My brain hits the panic switch and every muscle in my entire body locks up tighter than a virgin in the morning. But it's too late. I take a massive, painful poop all over. Her parents comfort her. And I mean large, huge, immense. This behemoth flew out of me with so much force it practically knocked her off the bed. I didn't see where it hit her, but she ran screaming. Oh my God. I always imagined that due to her position, it hit her right in the chin. Or at least the knockers. I would like to say I got up to go after her. But I heard the bathroom door shut and I just lay there. The smell hit me after a few seconds. It smelled like someone rolled a cat in feces and threw it into a tire fire. I looked down and saw, to date, the largest bowel movement I've ever seen lying on the bed. Then I noticed the blood, and when I did, I noticed the pain. Apparently the fact that it was so large caused it to rip my hole a little bit. There was a small pool of blood where my bum had been, a final reminder of the exact place and moment I lost my V card. I grabbed my work with both hands and go to the downstairs bathroom. I throw around 1/3 into the toilet and flush, fearing any more will clog it and only add to my already significant woes. I stand there holding 2/3 of my biggest poop of all time, feeling a trickle of blood flow down my leg, trying to ignore the sharp pain stabbing my rectum. I finished flushing my baby, cleaned off my hands, jammed toilet paper between my cheeks, and went upstairs. I could hear my girlfriend sobbing from behind the bathroom door. I decided not to say anything to her and just keep moving. The smell in her parents' room was abysmal. The scene is burned behind my eyelids for all time. My life, my shame. The very first time it smelled like a pile of dead babies. I quickly got dressed since the heat from 10,000 candles was making the room feel more like a porta potty in the middle of summer. I was aware enough to grab the comforter on my way out and drag it downstairs to their washer. Also the top and bottom sheet, since the blood had leaked all the way to the mattress. I jammed in the washer with 3 loads worth of detergent and set it on spin, knowing that not even the hand of God would save these linens, let alone Tide and Snuggles. Then I left. I avoided my girlfriend's calls for days until she came to my house. We had a long talk about what happened. Talk is anonymous. With breaking up with me because I pooped on her and it was all over. I took the V card of a terminally ill 41-year-old woman and I can't stop thinking about her. I am a male adult entertainment worker. My customers are mostly men and middle-aged women, so she was in no way a surprise for me. So this woman wanted me to meet her at a hotel room she specifically booked for us. I already knew a few things about her because of the messages she sent me. Like her name, her age, and that she never had a relationship. Let alone that she had never done the deed with anyone. When we met we greeted each other and she had a huge smile on her face. The first rule with my customers is that we get to know each other before we do what we do. We talked for about half an hour and I found out that she had leukemia and was about to pass. She also told me that she never found a boyfriend because of her looks. She was constantly called ugly and disgusting and no boy wanted to be near her. And this bullying continued during her adulthood. She was always treated like some kind of a weirdo. She just thought that she had to wait for the right one, but after so many years she lost hope and accepted that she is supposed to be lonely. And now that she's 41 and never slept with anyone, she felt like she missed out on the most beautiful things in life. Her parents passed many years ago and she had no one. She was all by herself. The money she wanted to pay me with was the money she was about to use for her treatment, but she told me that the doctor said that the treatment would only give her a little bit more time but not save her life, so she figured she could use it to finally find out what it's like to sleep with someone. I almost teared up a bit, but I forced myself to stay professional and just listen to what she had to say. When she was done we did what we did and afterwards she was smiling big time and said she hasn't felt this good in years. She asked me if I could lay down with her and cuddle. She said she'd pay more if I did that. And I said yes. We laid down, turned on the TV and she laid in my arms. What I assumed to be happy tears were rolling down her face and she snuggled closer to me and closed her eyes. This was the cutest thing I've ever seen. We laid there for 2 hours. She slept in my arms and I woke her up and told her I had to leave now. She nodded and turned around and grabbed her wallet. I told her she doesn't have to pay me. I gave her my number and offered for her to visit me whenever she feels alone and needs someone to be with. She visited me 2 times before she passed and called me every day. We became friends. I even attended her funeral. And it made me sad how few people were there. She was such a soft and kind-hearted human being. I can't stop thinking about her. My fiancé is threatening to end the wedding if I don't let her parents move in with us. After my grandfather's death 6 months ago, I inherited 90% of his wealth with a no-contest will, granting me not only enough money to never work again, but also a massive estate he claimed was his hunting cabin. It's big enough to fit my fiancé, my parents, and her parents comfortably. However, I said I didn't want them moving in with us, and now it's turned into a total blowout. To those who will ask, no common law doesn't apply to us, and after a heated debate she agreed to sign a prenup if I agreed to buy her a niece ring, and a vacation once a year. She clearly isn't with me for the money. Obviously, this comes off as a rich people problem, but up until 5 months ago I was still living in a one-bedroom apartment working at a rather large supermarket retail store making $12 an hour, and going to be paying off college debt until I was in my 60s. My fiancée is still working her nursing job, and we've been fully living together for 4 years. Some background into our relationship: we met 6 years ago. There were literally zero issues with us dating. When it came to some sort of conflict we sat down, explained both of our sides like adults, and generally fixed the problem. We've rarely gotten into arguments, and have the same end goals in life: children, grow old together, die, be buried next to each other, and have fun whenever we can. I've always had an incredibly distant relationship with her parents. When she introduced me to them, they both stated they didn't like me to my face and thought I wasn't good enough. Her father even said, "Not in my lifetime." When I asked for his permission to marry his daughter, which I stated the only reason I was doing it was for an olive branch. My parents on the other hand love my fiancée. They scooped her up like she was one of us from the start. Has never said anything bad about her in public, nor have they in private. She, at least, in my parents' eyes, is the metaphorical second coming of Christ. During my grandfather's decline in health, I was the first one there. He just got old, and with being old comes complications. I stopped working my higher paying job to work retail to have more time to take care of him, because his other children were busy. This was a very stressful time in our relationship. I had just recently left my job, was not around often, and I myself was super stressed. Recently, I began the slow move of everything over there. While we still have to live in our apartment until the lease agreement is up, there's nothing against the rules of me moving stuff. I brought it up to my girlfriend how taking care of my grandfather has really made me realize how important my family is, and that I wanted to know if it was okay for my parents to move into the new house with us. My dad could retire, and my mom can spend the rest of her life relaxing, not stressing over bills and debt. Because I can pay that off over time. I'm not insane enough to pay it all in one go. She expressed how that was an amazing idea, and how she'd like her parents to move in as well. I laughed at the idea, and asked her if she was serious, and why would I want to live in a house with people I don't like, nor want to interact with. She explained that this could be a good chance at us healing old wounds and making amends. I explained that not only do I not want to heal old wounds, if it was up to me, they wouldn't be coming to the wedding. Obviously this was the wrong thing to say, and now she's giving the ultimatum of let them move in, or the wedding is off. While I can understand her side, I seriously do not want to interact with them in any capacity. They've tried numerous times to get her back with exes, lie about me, even spread a rumor about me being unfaithful, until I pulled up real evidence of me being nowhere near where they said I was thanks to Google location. My fiancé knows all of this, and still wants to try and rebuild a relationship with them. This past week, I've been avoiding her with excuses and white lies. I've been meeting with accountants, lawyers, wedding venue people, and jewelers. I've also been spending all-nighters at my grandfather's grave drinking with him, and not getting back home until 4 a.m. To me, it feels like my grandfather is still the only person I can vent my deepest secrets and frustrations to. I've postponed the wedding. While some of you may refer to it as calling her bluff, I call it waiting and seeing. As of right now, we're really talking about how compatible we truly are, going over our goals in life again, and talking in depth about the relationship we want with our in-laws if we got married. Apparently a lot had changed since the last time we talked about it. She genuinely thought moving her parents in would make my relationship with them better over time. I've expressed that as a result of all they've said/done to me, any positive relationship or communication with them will only be done out of necessity. For example, if she was pregnant, in the hospital, or any life-altering complication or celebration. She did not take this well, but that was expected, but it's important I tell my truth. She believes I'll come around, and try to build a relationship with her parents, but as of right now I can't see myself doing it. My parents won't be moving in, as I haven't even asked them yet. I know some of you were confused/assumed it was already happening. It was not. I asked if it was okay if they could. Not telling her it was happening. Some of you suggested that maybe moving them in as newlyweds was weird, and suggested building them a small house on property. I didn't think about that, and will talk to my accountant/parents about it whenever that conversation needs to be talked about. Nice idea, Reddit strangers. What have I been doing? A lot of meetings about my future, finances, and setting up trust/wills. I'll be re-enrolling into school to take classes on business, finances, accounting, and economics as my accountant suggested I do. We're still working on a budget, but as of right now my next steps are furthering my education to manage my newfound wealth and opportunity in a healthy way as to not blow it. As of right now, to be honest, I'm emotionally drained. I think the weight of my grandfather's death is finally hitting me despite it being months later, and the only thing that kept me going was the idea of the wedding day. With that being postponed, I can really only focus on myself, my values, and my emotions. Staying up all night and drinking at a gravesite isn't healthy, and I've not only promised myself to cut back on the booze, but also not stay up drinking. I've been thinking about maybe getting into some sort of therapy or grief counseling, but I'd need to make sure that is in the budget with my accountant, as that's a long-term thing. Maybe they know someone. I know a lot say to drop the relationship, but I think after 6 years it's worth giving it a try to save it. Making a choice like that without trying to fix the problem seems silly, but I did expect a lot of those answers to come through. It's just how red it is. Just know that, I know my worth, I know my values, and I'm not backing down. Maybe we won't work things out, and the relationship will just end. Maybe things will work out, and we can continue. At least for now. 48 hours later, it's too soon to tell. As for the prenup, we haven't signed anything yet. A lot of you were really harping on the niece ring, and fancy vacations once a year thing. While the vacations compromise is indeed concerning, the ring issue is something we've been having conflict on for a while. My personal opinion before/now is that rings are overpriced, silly, and serve no significant purpose in a relationship. She says that they're an important symbol of love/commitment. The compromise to the prenup in regards to the ring was, I actually buy her a better ring than I already had. Which sounds super predatory in those words, but it makes sense in my mind. She doesn't want a Titanic heart of the ocean style jewelry piece, just something a bit more noticeable. I probably should have elaborated on that in my original post, but hey, we all make mistakes. Which to some sounds like gold digger mentality, but I know the price range of ring she wants, and it's about the same range my dad spent on my mom's ring. It's something you'd see on a middle-class woman's finger, nothing huge, nothing small, just enough I guess. I still think they're just silly circles of metal and compressed dirt. There's not much to say. We sat down, talked for a while. I explained my side of things, she explained hers. She was upset I was postponing the wedding, but once she realized I wasn't going to fold, she agreed under the notion that it was best for our relationship to work on this before marriage. Right now, I'm taking a step back from her to clear the air, and give us time to formulate what we want on our own. I've driven the 2 hours to the cabin. Thankfully the internet people hooked that up yesterday. I've talked to my parents, not about them like moving in, but about the situation as a whole. Leaving out, I went to the internet before I went to them. While my dad can't just abandon his job, he sends his love and support. My mom is currently making the 18-hour drive, so I wouldn't be alone by myself. I've gotten attempted phone calls from the in-laws within the last 24 hours, but I've watched them ring and went back to doing my everyday tasks like lawn work, meal prep, reading, binge-watching Netflix. It's strange, but right now I feel happier alone right now than I do with fiancé. Maybe it's some sign that it's not meant to be, or that I've finally been able to relax for the first time in years and have found comfort in solitude. Maybe I'm happy my mom is going to cook me my favorite dinner as a child. To cheer me up. I think as of right now though, I have a lot of work to do, not only emotionally but also literally. I'm thinking about doing some telework just to still have a main stream of income part-time, as I'll probably get bored of being jobless in about a week. I need some hobbies.
What was the worst "why the F did I say" that moment? I am a waiter. I try to hold the door open for every guest I wait on as they leave. One time I was holding the door for 3 women I had just waited on, one being an elderly lady, and using a walker. As she is waking towards me she says, "Thank you honey for getting me so full. And being so good to me." Before I tell you my response, I will try and justify it by saying if you work in customer service you know we have a mental catalog of phrases we use in certain situations. Well, I turned to the wrong page and said, "No problem ma'am, so full you can barely walk, huh?" All 3 women looked at me in disgust. The elderly lady's walk got much faster as one hugged her in consolation. The other lady, I'm assuming her daughter, said to me, "She is 89 years old, thank you. We are very proud of her." I began to try and explain myself, but she wasn't having it and walks away.
Growing up, I was told to never close my eyes in the shower. Ever since I was old enough to take showers on my own, I've been warned about closing my eyes in the shower. It sounds like such a ridiculous thing to be warned about, and I will admit that I didn't take it as seriously as I should have until I had a first-hand experience of what happens when you ignore this warning. The first time I did it, I was around 9 or 10 years old. I don't remember much, except that I was standing there, washing my hair as my mother's voice played over and over again in my head, telling me not to close my eyes. As I thought about the things that might happen that were so bad that nobody would even tell me about them, I began to feel freaked out, like I was being watched. Of course, wanting to be brave, I scoffed and closed my eyes. I only did it for about 2 seconds the first time. It was almost just a blink. When nothing happened, I did it for longer and kept doing that, gradually increasing the time that I had my eyes closed for. Once I kept my eyes closed for 10 seconds, I noticed that I could no longer feel the water hitting me from above. I stuck one hand out, but there was nothing. I remember slowly opening one eye to notice that I was no longer in my shower. I was in a weird, abandoned pool in a dark, dirty building. The tile in the pool was covered in green plants and what appeared to be moss. I opened my other eye so I could take a look around, and crossed my arms over my chest, extremely aware of the fact that I was exposed. I could hear something running above me, outside the pool, but I wasn't able to see anything. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracking. Suddenly, I caught movement toward the left corner of the pool and noticed a shape running directly at me. I was frozen in place as the thing came closer and I realized it was another person, covered in the green plants and moss around us, wide-eyed. They ran directly at me and threw me back, pushing both of their hands against my chest. "Not yet," they shouted. I was unable to tell if the voice was male or female, and the next thing I knew, there was a series of flashing lights that hurt my eyes. I squinted and noticed that my surroundings were changing from the old pool to my bathroom shower over and over again. It was starting to make me dizzy, and my vision went dark as I fell. When I woke up, I was in my shower, the water falling over me as I lay in the tub. My elbow and ribs hurt, most likely from the way I had fallen down. I got up, rinsed myself, and jumped out of the shower, dressing in a hurry, my clothing sticking to my damp skin. I was careful not to close my eyes for long periods after that. There were a few moments where I wasn't as careful as I should have been and got shampoo in my eyes. When that happened, I raced to rinse my eyes and hair as quickly as I could, but I would always see the old pool for a split second. It was just 1 second, and yet, it was the most fear I've ever felt in my entire life. I'm 23 now, and I still try my hardest not to close my eyes in the shower. In fact, I try my best to shower as fast as possible, and sometimes, when I'm extremely freaked out, I opt for washing my hair in my sink, so that there's no way I'll accidentally get shampoo in my eyes. 2 days ago, I took a normal shower. Everything was fine, and I was almost finished, when I accidentally squirted body wash straight into my left eye. I felt my heartbeat speed up immediately, as I held my face under the water. I frantically rinsed my eyes and face, trying to get the burning sensation out of my eye so I could open it again. I closed them both for less than a second, and when I opened them again, the bathtub was changing underneath me. The white porcelain was morphing into the dirty, moss-covered tile of the old pool that I had seen in my nightmare since the first time I had seen it. I started freaking out, as I finished rinsing my eye. I turned the shower water off and sped out of the shower, throwing myself through the curtain as I stepped out of the side, banging my shin against the side of the tub in the process. I grabbed my towel off the rack on the wall and wrapped it around me, limping out of the bathroom and into my bedroom where I closed and locked the door. I leaned against my bedroom door, trying to slow my breathing. After a few minutes, I got dressed and avoided the bathroom for the rest of the night. At around 2 in the morning, I awoke with a sudden urge to pee. I tried to ignore it, flipping over to my other side and closing my eyes, but the feeling only got stronger and so I begrudgingly got up and walked into the bathroom. I pushed the door open and stood just outside the doorway, flipping the light switch on and staring at myself in the mirror above the sink. I closed my eyes and blinked a few times as my eyes adjusted to the sudden change in light. Finally, I stepped into the bathroom, leaving the door open behind me, and proceeded to do my business. As I was washing my hands, I could hear a weird noise coming from the bathtub. It almost sounded like water was running down the drain, which was impossible. There was no way there was still any water in there. I approached the tub and threw the shower curtain open, to see that my tub and shower were gone. Instead of the porcelain tub and black tiled walls, there was now a portion of the old pool. I stared down at the small puddles of murky water, and the different types of grass and plants that were growing in it. I looked up and scanned the area, once again hearing footsteps above ground, but I wasn't able to see anything. Some old deteriorating benches and graffitied brick walls surrounded the pool, as well as a few trees that had grown inside the building. I scanned the area for the person that I had seen the last time, but there didn't appear to be anyone around. At least, not at first. Unfortunately, I quickly noticed that the shrubbery that covered the bottom of the pool was uneven and bumpy, and I bent down to get a closer look. That's when I noticed that there were people buried underneath everything. The plants were sort of encasing the bodies, and I was able to make out the shapes of a few faces. I backed up, trying to stop myself from shouting and drawing any unwanted attention. I heard the sound again, and I realized there was something out there that was making that sound. I shivered and threw the shower curtain closed again as I backed out of the bathroom. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night and was up again in about 3 hours. I forced myself to go into the bathroom again where I noticed that this, whatever it was spreading and had now taken over about 2/3 of my bathroom. I walked out of the bathroom and grabbed my car keys and phone. I sped through my apartment, making my way to the front door. As soon as I threw it open, however, I was met with an old, overgrown clearing in the middle of the woods. Confused, I stepped outside far enough to get a look at my apartment. Instead of being on the 3rd floor of the complex, the building that stood before me was old and worn down, like its surroundings. There were vines and moss growing on the outside of it, and I could tell that parts of the building were beginning to fall off. I ran back inside, slamming the door shut. I've been inside ever since. Little by little, the abandoned pool and building have taken over my apartment. The only room left now is the kitchen. Eventually, I know that I'll be stuck here, forced to survive in whatever this place is. I've been trying to contact family members, friends, and even the police for help, but none of my calls or texts have gone through. I'm not even sure this will end up anywhere. Even if it did, I'm not sure you can help. I guess this is better than not trying. There's something else here. I haven't seen the person I saw years back when I was here, but I can hear something outside. It sounds huge. Its footsteps shake the area, and its shadow blocks out all the light as it passes by the building. I don't think it knows I'm here yet. I don't want to think about what it might do when it becomes aware, but I know it will come for me soon.
Am I the a-hole for jumping out of a window to avoid my ex? Some backstory: I had been dating my ex-fiancée Sarah for 4 years. We had been planning to get married in November 2020, but I found out at the start of this month that she cheated on me. She begged me to give her another chance, but I broke it off. The problem was that being cheated on is, in my mind, completely emasculating and humiliating. So I never told anyone that was the reason we broke up. For obvious reasons, Sarah also didn't tell people we broke up because she cheated. So people have blamed me for the breakup, including my mom. They just see that I dumped her out of the blue. I've gone very strict with no contact with Sarah after I discovered she was cheating on me. Sarah has been talking with my mom and has convinced her that if we could talk one more time, we would be able to reconcile. My mom has been applying hardcore pressure on me to talk with Sarah, but I've explained that there's no chance we will ever get back together. So tonight I go over to my mom's place because she's hosting family for Christmas Eve. I'm there for a bit talking with my aunts and uncles and cousins when the doorbell rings and I can see it's Sarah. I asked what the F was going on and my mom says she invited Sarah so we can work this out in the spirit of the holidays. I'm pissed now because the only way to explain my side of the story is to tell everyone I was cheated on. Complete humiliation in front of my whole family. So as my mom goes to the front door, I go into the bathroom. My mom starts knocking on the door saying that I need to come out and talk to my ex like an adult. I say F it, kick out the window screen and get in my car and go home. My mom called a short while ago saying she's cutting ties with me over my behavior and that Sarah will always be like a child to her. My sister called me after to ream me out for ruining Christmas. I broke down and told her that Sarah cheated on me, which is why I dumped her and didn't want to see her under any circumstances. She called me a big a-hole who was lying to cover for myself. Am I really in the wrong?
I told my daughter that if she could find better, go find it, and now she's leaving. Me, 42 female, and my husband, 39 male, met 12 years ago through mutual friends. He had a daughter who at the time was 6 going on 7. Honestly, I loved her first. My husband was in the army and while deployed, CPS came and removed his daughter from her biological mom's home. She would have gone into foster care had his grandmother not stepped in. When my husband got home from deployment, he divorced his ex, and due to the neglect suffered in his absence, she lost all parental rights and visitation. The kid was 4 at the time and luckily has no memory of any of it, outside of her going to stay at grandma's until daddy came home. I met her shortly after her 6th birthday when she came over for a play date with my kids, who are only 1 and 2 years younger than her, and honestly that was it. She was mine. It started with her being at my house a lot. She had dinner with us while he was working, she went to the park with us, she just was one of my kids. For Christmas that year she told him she wanted a mom, and that it needed to be me. By February we were dating. Within 6 months of that, we were living as a blended family, and I was the one who threw her 7th birthday party. Our kids got along like they'd always been siblings, and now the 3 of them, 18 female in question, 17 male, 16 female, are thick as thieves. We've since had another baby together, now 9 male, and the 6 of us are what I always dreamed my family would be. She has called me mom from the moment her dad and I tied the knot, and if you didn't specifically know, you'd never know I didn't birth her. She even resembles me. Her bio mother pops up every 5 years or so demanding to see her. My husband at first was completely opposed to the idea, but the kid was curious to know her and I can't blame her. We talked about it the first time, she was 8 or 9, and she wanted to see her and the rest of her bio mother's side of the family. In the time since she'd seen her bio mom had given birth to another baby, and mostly she just wanted to know her brother. At the time I remember her being afraid that meeting with her bio mother would hurt my feelings, but I'm not that insecure. I, and maybe wrongly so, encouraged the visit. The way I saw it and explained it was that she had a mother at home. If the old one flaked again, no big deal, I'd be here. She came home from that visit upset and told us she didn't want to see her bio mother anymore, but wanted to see her bio mother's mother. We arranged a visitation schedule with her bio grandma. After a few visits she began to come home upset but wouldn't talk about it, and eventually asked to not go anymore. We were happy to tell bio grandma to kick rocks. They showed up again when she was around 15, and again she went with them. She came home an anxious ball of energy. Not angry, not crying, just really upset. It took me a minute to get it out of her, but she then told us that when she was younger, her bio grandma had been using her visits to force her to see her biological mother, and that she had stopped going over there because of it. On this night, not only was she taken to an ambush where her bio mother was waiting, but her brother who she had gone to see wasn't there. Come to find out CPS took him, terminated her rights, and adopted him out. No one had any idea where he was or if she'll ever see him again. Daughter was livid and told us she never wanted to see them again. We said cool and kicked her off the porch the next time she showed up. Our daughter of topic turned 18 and graduated high school within 30 days of each other. Her bio grandma sent her a card that said something along the lines of, "Your dad and stepmom can't tell you not to see me and your mom anymore. Please call us." She did end up calling her grandma and they had a heart-to-heart in which daughter was like, "Look, I have a mom and it's not your kid. I'll see you, but I won't see her." Grandma agreed and has been taking her to lunch once a month, and to her credit hasn't tried to get her to see her bio mother once. I'm not bothered they see each other, but I'm still very aware of what kind of people they are. Now, the trouble, we made her a deal that if she went to school she could live here rent-free, we'd help pay for tuition and whatever related expenses she had connected to that, food, clothing etc., but if she chose not to go to school we wanted her to work. For 6 months she has done nothing but go out with her friends, play video games, and basically just goof off. She even participated in a challenge she and her friends were doing to see who could go the longest without leaving the house, and she won. 2 weeks. She didn't leave the house for 14 days. We begged her to do something in the way of a job, anything. Even part-time. Entry-level retail work is super plentiful here, and I, having worked retail most of my adult life, even had enough pull to get her a couple of interviews. The first interview blew her off, which was sus, but we ignored it, and while she did go to the second one, she was told there was an error in her application and that she needed to fix it, she just needed to reapply. Once it was fixed the job was hers, and she just didn't reapply. Over Thanksgiving during an outing with friends, she was offered a volunteer position at a cat rescue cleaning cat boxes. She would get up every day, shower, get ready, walk by her own cat's dirty litter box, and then go do volunteer work 3 to 4 times a week. She was bragging about how well she was doing in her job at Thanksgiving, and my husband pointed out that she didn't have a job, she had a time killer. Jobs pay money. I guess that hurt her feelings because the same night she went in and called her bio grandma and told her, "God. You know. I don't even know what. That we were controlling and that she couldn't take it here anymore at the very least. They began to enact a plan to sneak her out of the house and move her to an entirely different state. We sat her down after the holiday and once again made a plea. I told her she was wasting herself, and that at the very least the place she was volunteering was hiring. Get a job there. She broke down and confessed the plan, and since then we have gotten, I don't know, a bunch of truth. It sucked. We found out that for years she's been telling people, especially on social media, that we're homophobic, and that she wanted to transition, but we wouldn't let her because we were transphobes. I myself am bi and have more ex-girlfriends than my husband, not a flex, just for context, but some stuff started to make so much sense suddenly. Her friend's mother one time called me a nasty name, and I didn't understand why. Now I do. Her friends, when they would come to our house, would walk on eggshells around us, or even better, show up looking as queer as possible to shock us. One girl came over wearing wings, a tulle skirt, elf ears, and then proudly told us she identified as a member of the Fae and waited for us to clutch our pearls. We were like, oh, okay. So what dietary restrictions should I be aware of for dinner? We chalked it up to them being kids and just trying to figure out who they were, no big deal. It turns out they were trying to scare the straights. Aside from that, I found out that she has been telling people that I specifically am very frequently verbally abusive, that her dad and I promised her she could take a year off and figure herself out, but now I'm going back on that and she can't take it anymore. She had no plans to tell us she was moving out to start, but since we found out she has since moved up her move-out date twice, a thing she doesn't know I know, and will now be moving out at the end of this week. They have promised her all new bedroom furniture, a car, and all the friends she can meet in their excruciatingly small town. I grew up in a town like that. She has no idea what it's like to have Dairy Queen be the height of society on a Friday night or have to drive an hour to see a movie. I was? Well, just so hurt. I told her if she felt like she could find better, go find it. She apologized and told me that when she was telling people all of those things that she was a dumb kid doing dumb kid stuff, but the fake kid was at her 18th birthday. This happened recently. I pointed that out and she asked me to not hate her, and I can't. I really can't. But I'm so angry. She didn't have a wicked stepmother, she didn't feel like she had enough drama or credibility to pain, so she made me into one and made sure the fictional version of her parents were awful. The damage is done. Whoever has been hearing that about us now thinks that about us, and she pointed out that I shouldn't care because they're all younger than me. But I mean that friend's mom was rude. Super rude. So it does bother me. When I asked her if she was going to at least be home for Christmas, she said she didn't know, and I think that's when I realized just how deep it was getting for me. Honestly, I don't think I care if she comes home for it. I'm not sure I want her there. I can't help but wonder where else this has affected my life. My mother-in-law hates me so much that she and my husband have gone completely non-contact. Was that because the kid was telling her I was abusive? My younger daughter has told us she's staying out of it, but I can hear them argue about me. My older son isn't speaking to her. He said other things are starting to make sense and now he wonders if she's been lying to people about him too. I haven't been a saint since this went down. I don't mean to come off like I'm trying to make myself one. I told her I was ashamed of her, that she had enough trauma in her life to be interesting without having to steal someone else's. In the heat of the moment I called her lazy and a liar, and I told her she was acting just like her bio mother and she now won't speak to me. She left our group family chat. She won't tell me what she wants for Christmas, and now we can't be in the same room without me struggling not to take cheap shots, so if she's somewhere I just leave. And at the end of it, really, I'm scared about her going to live with this family. This grandma was super cool letting her go into foster care while her dad was deployed because she, and I quote, wasn't gonna raise someone else's 4-year-old. I have no idea if she was offered custody of the brother, but if she was, I doubt she agreed to take him. I'm afraid daughter will try to pull this crap there, and that they'll kick her out into the cold at 2 a.m., carless and alone, the next state over. I promise you I would run to get her, but it's still at minimum a 3-hour drive if I were to really hustle. None of that, not how much I still love her, not how much I ultimately don't want her to go, none of it will keep her safe. I don't know what to do, and I don't want to lose her.
Parents, why is your child a disappointment? Technically my stepdaughter. I never planned or wanted kids, but fell in love with a man who had sole custody of his 9-year-old daughter, and realized pretty immediately that I loved her too. Biomom is a dangerous narcissist as both husband and kid have scars from wounds she inflicted on them. The mom has made zero attempt to be in my kid's life since the divorce. Over the last 9 years my husband and I have worked hard to raise an intelligent, thoughtful, caring young adult. We've tried to nurture a healthy home life. Obviously, she and he were both in therapy following the split from her biomom and they both seem to thrive. We do not speak negatively about her biomom. When she makes attempts to reconnect with her biomom, we are supportive and reassure her when those efforts are rebuffed. Both my husband and I want her to have a life full of positive experiences. We encouraged her to pursue extracurriculars and she seemed to innately pick up on instruments, dance, technical skills, etc. We rebuilt car engines with her and taught her to dance the Charleston for a school play. We have focused our income and energies on raising an engaged adult. When my husband was laid off, I got a second job, working 80 hours a week, so we could continue to support her extracurriculars while still saving for her college fund and, pay bills. One of her extracurriculars was pageantry. Totally not my thing, but some of her friends had gotten into it and she wanted to try it out. Okay, cool. I don't know if you're aware, but there is literally no way to do a pageant on the cheap. Even with her dad making a couple of her costumes, we had poured over $1,000 into this. She needs one more dress and we were clear. You have to keep it under $500. There is literally no money left after that. She found her perfect dress that exceeded the budget by a few hundred. We said no. She goes to her bio mom who's on husband number 5 and quickly burning through his money. Bio mom buys the dress. Husband and I are actually pretty surprised and relieved. Night of the pageant, one of the things all the contestants do is write up a bio of the people who supported them and helped make them who they are. They get to my kid and begin reading this beautiful piece she's written about her mom, her bio mom and all the sacrifices she made to raise her and her siblings. She has 2 half-siblings, neither of whom live with the bio mom, and on and on. I was shell-shocked. Most of her friends' parents in the audience are looking at me in confusion because no one's actually met her bio mom before. I'm the one at every game, volunteering on all the booster clubs and sitting in PTA meetings. A few of them came to talk to me after, saying how that wasn't right, and I put on my smile and just reiterated how we want her to have a positive relationship with her bio mom. What is the craziest thing that happened in your school? This happened in the early 90s when gangsta rap was at its peak. I attended a rather posh private Catholic school. About 90% of the kids there were the sons of wealthy professionals and business people. The other 10% was kids on athletic and academic scholarships. A group of freshmen and sophomores decided they would form a gang. It was freaking hilarious. They actually jump each other in, rode around tagging, and throwing gang signs, and sporting all Raiders hats and buttoned-up flannel shirts. Keep in mind all these guys were little rich kids. One was the son of my dentist, another the son of a lawyer, etc. For some goddamn reason everyone in their grade was scared of them, despite the fact they really had no reason to. Apparently the rumor was that one of them had a knife and one had a firearm, so they would walk around and try to intimidate people. One day I was having lunch with my best friend and his girlfriend when these dudes passed by, shot us their gang sign, a generic East Side sign as they were the East Street Forks, and one said, "Yo, you wanna get with a real man?" to my friend's girlfriend. My friend got up pretty mad. Just a little background, my friend was there on a football scholarship. He wasn't a rich kid like me or the gang. His dad was a mailman and he lived in a pretty bad neighborhood, the kind where real gangs hung out, the kind you actually heard drive-by shootings at night. So he wasn't really impressed by these guys. He sprang up and went up to the guy and told him, "What did you say?" The leader of the gang told my friend to chill, that he needed to watch himself because he was stepping to the East Street Forks. He lifted his flannel shirt and showed him a firearm handle. My friend just snapped. He grabbed the kid by the shirt and started to slap the crap out of him. No punching, just slapping him silly. He started screaming he wasn't gonna punch him, because you punch men, and that you slap girls. After about 20 slaps the firearm fell out of his waistband and it turned out to be a starter pistol. The rest of his gang stood there frozen shitless as my friend continued to slap their leader. The kid eventually started to wail and my friend stopped. They all stood there quietly just watching their boy cry. From then on they would avoid us whenever they saw us. Years later I found out one of my current girlfriend's best friends dated this kid on and off for years. He had seen me with my girlfriend talking to her. He proceeded to tell her I was one of the bullies who made his life hell in high school. How have you shut up mocking bullies? I know how it feels to be constantly harassed by mocking bullies. It's like being poked and prodded with their cruel words and derisive laughter. But let me tell you about the time I shut up a bunch of those losers and gave them a taste of their own medicine. Back in high school, there was this one guy named Brad. He was your typical bully who thought he was the king of the world. He had his little posse of followers who would back him up no matter what. They used to make fun of me for anything they could find, my appearance, my interests, my sexuality, you name it. But little did they know, I had something up my sleeve that would shut them up for good. One day, I overheard Brad spreading nasty rumors about me being bisexual. It infuriated me, not because there's anything wrong with being bisexual, but because these buttholes were using it as a weapon to mock and demean me. So, I decided to play their game and turn the tables on them. I found out that Brad had a secret crush on this girl named Sarah, who happened to be my close friend. I decided to use this information to my advantage. I approached Sarah and told her about Brad's feelings, making it seem like I was looking out for her. We devised a plan that would teach those bullies a lesson they'd never forget. During lunchtime the next day, we executed our plan. Sarah went up to Brad and flirtatiously asked if he wanted to go out on a date with her. He couldn't believe his luck and gladly accepted. Little did he know that I had recorded the entire conversation discreetly. On the day of their date, Sarah told Brad to meet her at a popular restaurant. And guess who else was there? Yep, you guessed it, me. As Brad sat there, all confident and smug, I walked over and casually dropped my phone on the table in front of him. You should have seen the color drain from his face when he saw the video playing, revealing his secrets. The entire restaurant suddenly turned silent, eyes locked on Brad's humiliation. In that moment, the mocking bullies had nothing left to say. Brad was exposed, and his posse had to witness it all. The laughter that used to be directed at me now echoed throughout the restaurant, mocking him and his foolishness. It was like sweet justice served on a silver platter. From that day forward, Brad and his crew never dared to utter a single word against me or anyone else. My victory against those mocking bullies became legendary in the halls of our high school. And as I walked away from the restaurant, head held high, I knew I had taken a stand against the tormentors and shut them up for good. But hey, the story doesn't end there. I've since gone on to become a successful business owner, and I still remember the look of shock and humiliation on Brad's face. I'm sure he's still out there somewhere, And I'm sure he still remembers that fateful day. I'm sure he still remembers the day when I proved that no matter how powerful the bullies may seem, there's always someone out there who's willing to stand up and fight back. And that's a lesson that I will never forget. Feeling lost, what on earth is wrong with me? Need advice. I feel like there's something wrong with me, but I can't quite figure out what it is. Tonight was supposed to be my first time attending a writer's club. I walked there alone, getting there 5 minutes early. As I approached, I saw people going inside and being warmly welcomed. But then, suddenly, it pooped me, a wave of fear that turned me into stone. I couldn't move, frozen in place, my heart racing. I couldn't control my breathing, overwhelmed by the thought of being in there with all those unfamiliar faces. I stood outside for 45 minutes before finally giving up and heading back home. When I got home, my stepmother, 38F, shouted at me, expressing her disappointment. She told me I wasn't a baby anymore and needed to grow up. According to her, there was something seriously wrong with me. This sort of thing has been happening my whole life. Every time I join a club or group, I become so nervous beforehand that I feel physically ill. Sometimes it's so overwhelming that I don't even show up. My parents would scold me, telling me I was letting down my team or coach, and how I needed to toughen up and overcome it. If it were as simple as that, I would have done it by now. I've intentionally missed my stops or buses to avoid going to school. Even when I did go, I felt extremely sick and would uncontrollably shake before classes. I vividly recall a time when my father, 40M, was vomiting, and my stepmother used it as an opportunity to make me feel guilty for all the times I felt sick. She dismissed my fears as fake, believing that I used them as an excuse to avoid things I simply didn't want to do because I was ungrateful. I wish I could explain to her that this is not the case, but I struggle to find another explanation that she would understand. This anxiety has affected almost every aspect of my life. I had a school counselor, but I would pretend to forget appointments to avoid going. I've skipped out on family events that I genuinely wanted to attend because my fear overwhelmed me. I used to have to see my biological mother twice a year, and every time, I would freak out. But I was forced to go anyway. Some days, I'm too terrified to even leave the house, or if we have guests over, I'll confine myself to my room. Recently, I went for a job interview where my anxiety was on full display. I was fidgety, anxious, and nervous. Surprisingly, I got the job, but my stepmother was astonished. She believed it was sheer luck and assured me it wouldn't happen again in the future because I would control my anxiety. I don't want to keep living like this, but I'm at a loss for what's causing it and how to address it. If anyone has any advice or guidance, please share it with me. Today I effed up by making a girl I like laugh so hard she ended up in hospital and I almost lost my job. So there's this girl I like at work, and we're really good friends. We're having lunch and we're making those ironic depression meme jokes as most friends do. For some reason I, in my unknowingly stupid way to get her laugh, got the idea to say, well hey, you know what's just one letter away from sad? Dab. And promptly did the deed. Also I have ability to cry on demand, so I just stared stone cold her and let 2 tears fall down. She finds it funny. Extremely funny. So funny she drops to the floor and starts laughing her ass off. After a good 30 seconds she starts grabbing her chest and coughing. I asked if she was okay when she starts wheezing and begins to convulse a bit. Freaking the fuck out and thinking she's having a damn seizure, I start to reach for my phone. And in the exact second, my manager randomly decides to come in and sees this big guy towering over this poor little girl on the floor. I only managed to cut off her impending rage by saying I think she's having a seizure and I'm calling 911. Fortunately, I was able to explain to her what happened after the ambulance came. Turns out she has asthma, and my joke caused a flare-up, and was waving her arms to try to tell me to get her inhaler. Whoops. What was the biggest scandal at your high school? Liz was every boy's fantasy. A body to die for, a winsome smile, bedroom eyes, and a soft way about her that made every guy drool. She was so hot, blind men would turn their heads to follow her as she walked past. Even gay guys hated to see her go, but loved to watch her leave. That's how hot she was. One day she didn't show up, or the next day, or the next. Months passed, but no more Liz. One day, a group of us guys were sitting around at lunch and someone asked, "Whatever happened to Liz?" One of the guys laughed and said, "She is staying with her aunt and uncle up in St. Louis. Her parents couldn't handle what she did." When we asked what she did, he said, "I'll show you tomorrow." The next day, as we gathered around, he pulled out a magazine that promotes the biker lifestyle and advocates for substance use. If I remember correctly, it was called High Society. He flipped through the pages and showed us a photo of a very hot young lady posed naked on a bike. A 15-year-old hot young lady. A lady with a body to die for. A winsome smile, bedroom eyes, and a soft way about her that made guys drool. One that would make blind men take a second look and could turn gay men straight. It was the girl of our dreams, Liz. But this wasn't even the really scandalous part. The craziest part of the story was that the picture was taken by one of our teachers, Mr. Runson. Mr. Runson was a cool teacher. He rode a motorcycle and had tattoos. And all of the girls secretly had a crush on him. Well, apparently Liz didn't keep her feelings about him a secret and they started seeing each other. He got canned for taking the picture. There had always been rumors that Liz and the teacher were dating. Rumors circulated for years, but nothing was ever found out about what actually happened. But a 15-year-old going out with her teacher and allowing him to take pictures of her naked on his bike and posting it in a national magazine. It was quite a scandal.
I broke my son and his girlfriend up, and he has no idea it was me. I, 49 female, broke my son and his girlfriend up. They had been dating for almost a year, and seemed very happy. For some backstory, my son, 19, moved out pretty soon after his biological father passed away. He told me he wanted to expand on life, because he was nervous he would waste it away being depressed over the death of someone so important to him. I understood completely and allowed him space and freedom, but we talked daily and he visited all the time. After a while of living alone, he moved back. It was around this time that he introduced me to Kaylee. Kaylee and I got along immediately. She lacked a mother in her life, and I think she was quick to establish that relationship with me. Off the bat I noticed she was extremely paranoid and had extreme trust issues, but she wasn't toxic or manipulative, just anxious about where my son was going after work. She'd ask me and I'd answer with he went to his friend Mike's house. They hang out to play PlayStation with each other. We both genuinely believed that my son was at Mike's house, and we had no reason to suspect he wasn't. One night, after my son came home to pick up his PS5 to hang out with Mike, Kaylee asked me to pick up some tampons and Tylenol for her. She lived close and her periods were always super intense, so I was used to going out late into the night to help her. My son gets out of work at 4 o'clock and is usually home or at Kaylee's place by 5:30, 6 o'clock at the latest. It was 6 and he hadn't swung by to drop off his PS5, so I shot him a text before I left the house to let him know why I was gone. It was something like, "Hey, Kaylee is on her period, so I'm heading out to grab supplies. You okay?" He answered me while I was driving, and I checked it when I got to the store. It was something like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Mike needed help building a shelf he bought, so I'm staying a little later." I sent back some messages saying okay, be safe, all of that mother stuff. But I was not ready to see Mike, working the cash register, smiling at me as soon as I walked in. I hadn't forgotten he worked here, but obviously, figured it was his day off. I smiled back, but immediately I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he means he is building it for Mike, while he works? I couldn't even think straight. I just got the tampons, some snacks and Tylenol for Kaylee and went to the register. Mike obviously started small talk with me. Paraphrasing because my memory is bad, but it went something like this. "Hi Mrs., last name." "Hello Mike. How are you doing?" "I'm alright, just getting some supplies for my son's girlfriend." I remembered he laughed. "Speaking of your son, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. I need him to give me my PS5 controller he borrowed. Can you tell him that?" I felt sick again. I didn't want to put my son in the spotlight, so I didn't mention the stories my son had been feeding me. I just smiled and said, "I'll let him know." I paid for my stuff and left quickly. I drove to Kaylee's house and gave her the supplies, but I didn't know what to say, or how to say it. She was smiling and laughing, and looked carefree. She asked me where my son was. I couldn't lie to her, I couldn't. So I answered honestly, "I don't know." I didn't know where he was, or who he was with. I just told her to call him and ask. She thanked me and I left her house. Later that night, at around 8 p.m., my son finally came home. I didn't say much to him, just asked him if he had fun. He said yeah, and went to his room. I knew I had to tell Kaylee. Soon after, I went into my room and called her. I informed her of what Mike had said, and how late he had gotten home. She told me that he said he was home hours ago, just tired so he wasn't going to visit. I could tell she was crying, and I asked her if she wanted me to come over. I went to her house and we talked about everything, and she told me she didn't want anything to do with him, and wanted to break up with him immediately. I told her she could, and if she wanted, she could be honest and say I told her. After I comforted her for a few hours, she asked if she could still contact me, even if she wasn't with my son. I said yes, but honestly, I'm hesitant about it. I love her, but it feels off to me. I would still help her though. Fast forward a few days and my son comes crying to me that Kaylee broke up with him and isn't giving him any reason. I, of course, comfort him too. He said that she needed time to think about it and would tell him why when she knows what to say, but for now, she is supposedly speechless. I was too, so I don't blame her. He cried for hours in his room, and in my arms, and regardless of what he did, of what I did, I comforted him. I want to tell him what I know, and I feel bad that he doesn't know. But Kaylee didn't tell him anything yet, so I might wait. Honestly? I feel stuck. This isn't just about cheating, even though I think he is. This is about trust, and how he is lying to me, and his girlfriend. We both know there is a possibility he isn't cheating, but he shouldn't have to lie if he has nothing to hide.
What's the craziest conversation you've accidentally eavesdropped on? 2 of them. Conversation number 1. Coming home on Amtrak from visiting my family a few years ago. A young 20-something couple sits behind me, and they clearly have just gotten engaged. They're happy, they're talking to each other in just the most loving, affectionate way, and discussing plans for their upcoming wedding. It's all good. This is clearly a happy and excited couple, and you could tell this was probably the first discussion they'd had about their wedding plans. So the girl happily brings up something about what they should have on the menu, like 2 or 3 choices for the adults, but then a 4th option that the kids would like. And the guy goes, "Kids? I don't want kids there." Instantly, the temperature in the train car drops about 10 degrees. She goes, "You don't? How can we not let kids there? We have family members with kids. Kids have to be allowed." Then he says, and this is a point I thought was very valid, he says, having kids at the wedding or having a child-free wedding makes it a very different kind of ceremony. It's not just a matter of kids are allowed or kids aren't allowed. It changes the tone of the whole thing, which actually I agree with. I'm not married, but I've been to plenty of weddings that were kid-free and some that were kids allowed, and they were both very different. The train ride was 3.5 hours, and the conversation just got worse and worse the whole way. Again, to give the prospective groom credit, he stayed very calm and tried to be rational about it. She went from glowingly happy to less happy, to attempted neutrality to furious. By the time we got to our destination, she was crying and yelling at him. He made points that if we don't have kids at our wedding, it doesn't mean we don't like kids, or don't love our family members who have kids. It just means that if we want a more adult, intimate wedding, it's something we need to strongly consider. Wondered about them later on, if that was something that was clearly a deal breaker for both of them. Conversation 2, this one is shorter. Again, a few years ago, I was at a small neighborhood drugstore. I was at the register paying for my stuff, and behind me was a girl with 2 guys, and they're buying 2 huge boxes of rubbers. I'm facing the cashier when all of a sudden I hear the girl say, "We're gonna have a good time. You both are gonna get so lucky tonight. I'm gonna give you guys everything you want." I looked across and locked eyes with the cashier. We both communicated a silent holy shit to each other as she handed me my items and I hurried out.
I gave flowers to my husband today, and his reaction made me realize I might be a bad wife. Recently, my friends made fun of me by saying that my husband is the romantic one in our relationship, and he won by a significant margin in that department. They even scoffed at the idea that I could be romantic at all. This made me self-conscious as one of my friends went on to detail how much more romantic he is than all my friends' husbands and how I am the opposite. This has been on my mind all week, and today, a male co-worker was talking about how his wife gave him flowers and how he was surprisingly happy about it, so I thought, well, why not? He always buys me flowers. I should start being more romantic. After work, I went to pick up a bouquet and headed home. When I arrived, he was playing with our daughter, and I gave him the bouquet and said, "I was thinking about you and got you this." He started crying. He cried so much. He thanked me, hugged me, and then looked for a vase to put the flowers on. Throughout the night, he cried randomly 2 separate times. I asked him if anything else happened for him to be that way, and he said no, that he was just happy that I got him flowers and was feeling a bit emotional. And I'm here thinking, am I a terrible wife? He always gets me flowers, and I never get emotional like that. Not even close. Now I'm thinking back, and I don't do nearly as much for him compared to what he does for me in every way, and my friends are 100% right. Romantically, he kicks my ass. I just feel terrible because I love him more than anything. He is my world, and I could not imagine myself without him. He is a fantastic husband and an even better father, and mostly, he is my best friend. But I guess I don't show him how much I appreciate him, and he doesn't know how much I love him, which makes me sad. And then that makes me feel even worse because I'm thinking of myself instead of him. Now I'm in bed. I can't sleep thinking about this. I don't know if I should talk to him about it or just quietly try to be better and show him how much I appreciate him.
My wife is Dad. When my son was born, I was a stay-at-home dad for the first year of his life. We also lived in New York City, and I loved taking him out into the city to do things. Nearly every subway ride, though, I'd have some kind of encounter with a woman or group of women who would say some variation of, "Giving mom the day off?" Or "So nice to see dad's babysitting once in a while." Now, first off, it's not possible to babysit your own kid. It's just called parenting.
But second, I was the primary caregiver.
Mom was at work. I stayed home with the boy. It got real old fast. But I found a very nice trick that shut these old biddies down real quick. Anytime someone would ask if I was babysitting or giving mom the day off, my face would fall, I'd get real quiet, and after taking a moment to compose myself I'd say something like, "My wife passed away during childbirth," or "My wife is currently undergoing radiation treatment for stage 4 cancer. She's at a clinic in California, I haven't seen her in several months," or, my favorite, "His mom abandoned us when he was just 6 weeks old. She'd been using drugs pretty heavily while she was pregnant, so he was born addicted. I didn't hear from his mother for months after she left until one day I found out she'd overdosed and passed away. This little guy is all I've got left of her. But we carry on, best we can." Shut them up real quick. I think this might be a little effed up, but to be honest, it's perfect to get out of these situations super quickly. Is this wrong of me to do? This is what I saw after I was pronounced medically dead. My life is now a living hell. I got into a bad car crash with my wife and son in the vehicle. Pain plagued my body, my chest was tight and my lungs were on fire. My limbs were screaming, and I could hear sirens blaring in the background. Male. 46. Motor vehicle accident. Wife and child died on impact. I could feel the faint trickle of blood flowing from my forehead. I need someone doing chest compressions and CPR. My ribs crushed as someone pounded up and down into my chest. "Where's the AED, damn it?" I could tell I was fading. Another voice echoed off to the side. "He went 4 minutes without compressions or CPR, it's not looking good." Those dumb F-seekers over there were just staring at him before EMS arrived. They could have saved a life. Electricity coursed through my body. Shock after shock. We're losing him. I slipped into a haze. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes I was surrounded by a sea of clouds. I looked up. My wife and daughter floated above me, adorned in white. Was I dead? Was this heaven? My wife spoke with a gentle tone, caressing me on the face. "You're here with us now, Jerry." "What? What happened?" My wife continued stroking my face. "Don't you remember Jerry? You picked us up from the movies. The car flipped. Alicia and I died immediately, and they couldn't save you in time." My heart sank. Tears filled my eyes, but my wife gently wiped them from my face. I took a breath, her warm touch comforting me. My spirit soon rose at the thought of spending eternity with the two people I love the most. But then, my wife's gentle touch ceased. She grabbed me by the chin. The expression on her face grew cold. "I need to ask you something, Jerry." I gulped. "Tell me, were you drinking again tonight?" I froze. She knew, and I couldn't hide it. Tears poured down my face again as I sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Elaine. I made a mistake. I didn't realize I was drunk. Please, forgive me." I could see anger brewing inside her. "It's not your time, Jerry. You don't deserve to be with us. You deserve pain and agony, you deserve lifelong suffering. And when it is your time, you won't be coming back to this place." Everything faded to black again. I woke up to shocks and pounds in my chest. "We have a pulse."
What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up but is 100% real? I was the best man on both sides of a lesbian wedding because I had dated both the bride and the bride stayed close friends and introduced them to each other after our breakups. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone leave. A kid ended up leaving and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple minutes later the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. Probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. I've published 4 peer-reviewed scientific papers on hamster testicles. I won 2 TV game shows. The $10,000 Pyramid won $10,300 in 1975 and Sale of the Century was on the show for 9 days, won $34,000 in cash and prizes in 1985. I got ran over by a car but the driver didn't see me and proceeded to back over me.
My girlfriend wakes me up every day by tickling me. Did I go too far by hospitalizing her? So my girlfriend is an early riser. We're talking 7 a.m. or so each morning, whereas I am a night owl who sleeps until around 10. We have recently moved in together and this difference between us has started to cause some serious problems. The main problem is my girlfriend is trying her best to make me wake up earlier and start the day together. It does get annoying, having to deal with her scratching my head and telling me to wake up as early as 8:30 some days. Well, scratching my head and kissing me to wake me up clearly did not work, so she moved to tickling me. See, I'm quite ticklish. I can't stand it when somebody does it to me, but this is her new method of waking me up. It is very effective, and although I do get up earlier, I hate it. It has been happening for a few weeks now. At 8 a.m. sharp every day, she will tickle me to wake me up. We both work remotely on very flexible schedules and I have tried telling her what time I wake up does not matter, but she insists. I have told her the only way she has permission to wake me up before 10 is if she goes down on me to do so. Alas, she has not listened. I have told her every day for the last few weeks that I do not like it when she tickles me awake, yet she keeps doing it. It all culminated this morning. So before she went to bed last night, I asked her if she could please just let me sleep in, and she replied we'll see with a cheeky grin. Well, this morning I was awoken by a barrage of tickles on my feet. Not only did she do it, she did it a few minutes past 7 a.m., almost a full hour earlier than she usually does it. I'll admit, I saw red and I lost it. I started kicking my feet, really hard. I made contact with her and I instantly saw her jump back and clutch her face. But I was not done. I'm not sure if it was the lack of sleep or what, and I do not know what came over me, but I got out of bed and just started wailing on her. I made contact with each body part imaginable. It was only after the 10th or so blow that I realized what I was doing and instantly stopped. I tried apologizing profusely, but she ran away crying immediately and locked herself in the bathroom. Her sister picked her up shortly after and they went away. I managed to catch a glimpse of my girlfriend's face and I was shocked at what I had done. I have left her with bruises in the past, but this time I really went too far. Her sister texted me later telling me that the relationship is over and that I will be covering the hospital bills. Thanks for watching. Medical professionals, have you ever had a patient so lacking in common sense you wondered how they made it this far? I'm a vet. A few years ago I had a client bring his young cat in complaining of lethargy. Besides being a bit underweight, the physical exam was unremarkable, so I asked more questions about the cat's diet. Me, what do you feed the cat? Owner, shows an online trendy raw food brand. Me, how is his appetite? Does he finish what you feed him? Owner, yes, he always eats everything. Me, how much do you feed him? Owner, half a cup. Me, once or twice daily? Owner, once every 3 or 4 days. Me, you only feed your cat twice a week? Owner, I believe in a more natural feeding approach, and based on my research that's how often cats eat in the wild. This owner was slowly starving his cat to death based on some stupid idea he'd made up watching National Geographic. I had to explain to him that domestic cats are not tigers, and that small wild cats eat 10 to 20 small meals daily. Surprise surprise, the cat's lethargy and weight improved with regular feeding. I work in the ER and the one that left me dumbfounded was a woman who was brought in by her sister for pelvic cramps, amenorrhea for 3 months. Lo and behold, she's pregnant. Sister informs me that she sleeps with the Brazilian construction workers building the condo complex next door. I ask if they have any questions. The patient asked me if her baby would come out speaking Spanish. After a long pause, and her sister staring at the ceiling, I told her, no, because they speak Portuguese in Brazil. Patient seemed relieved and the sister hustled her out of the ER before I could discharge her. I worked dead for 10 years. One of the worst was we had a guy come in. He was a twin. He told us he needed to get checked for PP diseases because his sister apparently just got one. We of course had to ask if he has slept with her and he said no, but they were twins, so what she has, so does he. After a collective sigh of relief that this wasn't some weird Alabama sister stuff, we had to educate him that is not how it worked at all. My friends caught me leaving a party to beat my meat. I have an anxiety-driven habit of hating to say goodbye at parties. Everyone asks you to stay, everyone says just one more drink or game or song or round. So I've always been that guy who quietly ducks out. I've often been told I'm an a-hole because it makes people worry when we're all together, and I disappear. My anxiety doesn't care. About a decade ago we were all at a friend's house for a get-together. It was getting late and we were all outside for a smoke break. Everyone started to head in and I realized I was the last one outside. So I took the opportunity to go ahead and take it to the house. Got home to a one-bedroom apartment behind my mom's house, where I had become accustomed to leaving my front door unlocked, got ready for bed, and decided to stroke one out. Unbeknownst to me, about 10 minutes after everyone went inside at the party, someone pointed out that I had pulled my usual disappearing trick. Two of my half-drunk friends decided they were not going to have it this particular evening. They decided they were going to head my way and drag me out for the remainder of the evening. I was holding my phone in the air watching Korn, mid-stroke, when my friends came bursting in through the front door, running through the tiny living room towards my room, and jumped on my bed. I still had my wiener in my hand, furiously trying to shove it back in my boxers without dropping my phone on my face, while my friend was still airborne, looking me right in the eyes. Long story short, they threatened to tell everyone if I didn't come back out and party with them. Within 5 minutes of rejoining the group, they promptly told everyone. My brother died in, and I'm the only one who knows the truth. My brother died in a car accident in 2020. My family thinks he died on impact. I'm the only one who has spoken with the medical examiner and read the report. My parents never wanted to. They were okay with me doing it and relaying the info to them. The truth is, there was a fire and he burned alive. My parents know about the fire. BC, we weren't allowed to view him after he died. But I told them he died instantly from blunt force trauma and the fire just happened afterwards. Not true. He was alive and he burned. That's what was in the report. He also had over 3x the legal limit of alcohol in him, and meth in his system as well. My brother struggled with substance abuse issues the last decade of his life. I knew about his issue with alcohol, but was truly shocked and left speechless about the substances. This was a part of the report which I told my parents he came back clean. We were all under the impression that he'd been sober for almost that last year of his life, so it would have been too much to tell them otherwise. My brother wasn't a bad person. He had a struggle that he couldn't overcome. He did something really stupid, and I thank God all the time he at least didn't hurt anyone else. And it's not like he got away with it. He paid for it with his life, and in a pretty horrific way. The burden of being the only one who knows all of this is killing me. To know my brother died alone and in so much pain haunts me daily. But I have no one to vent to. And to know that he was using meth. He must have been so depressed and in a bad place mentally, which is also hard for me to think about, that he died sad and struggling. I won't ever tell my parents because they won't be able to bear it. They already struggle enough with just thinking his death was instant. And I also don't want to tell any friends because honestly I don't want anyone to judge him for what he did. I know it was bad. I often struggle with feeling angry. With him, I just can't handle hearing that type of stuff when it'll do no good. He's gone and the only person it will upset is me. Can't shake thoughts of my ex despite the abuse. How do you cope? We ended our relationship a year ago, but the truth is, I'd wanted to break up for a long time. I held on to hope that things would improve because we had good moments in the past and plans for the future. I settled for less, thinking we would address our issues later. However, they started lying about their whereabouts and actions. They could switch their emotions in an instant, forcing me to be cautious with everything I said or did around them. They often belittled my appearance and behavior, and didn't want me to succeed in anything. There were instances where they became physically aggressive, and I would try to restrain them from hurting themselves. They held resentment towards their own family, despite the support they received, and they were even jealous of an ex who had manipulated me into doing drugs. One of the worst realizations was that they coerced me into intimacy without respecting my consent at the start of our relationship. I should have recognized that as a major warning sign, but I didn't. Everything revolved around them, and I was there to support them. Nevertheless, they broke up with me via text before school started, claiming they wanted to remain friends. I asked for explanations, and they blamed their own issues, claiming they needed to focus on their treatment and improve their communication skills before being in a relationship. However, they added that we couldn't discuss our past relationship, see each other, call each other, or even play video games together. It felt like I was supposed to treat them as a stranger and just ask them simple questions like how's your day? It didn't align with the friendships I knew. I knew I should have gone no contact right then, because they had hurt me deeply and left me at my most vulnerable moment. Despite their claims of focusing on treatment and avoiding relationships, they would skip their sessions and responsibilities to play video games with someone they met online. This made me question if it was all just another lie. Whenever I asked about it, they would get angry and accuse me of trying to bring them down whenever I felt they were moving on. They would confuse me by ignoring my messages for days, and then when I finally told them how worthless they made me feel or mentioned things I missed about our time together, they would respond by saying it wasn't their responsibility to deal with my feelings. I questioned why they hadn't blocked me yet, and they would just ask, why would I? This cycle of confusion repeated for months. Finally, after a year of back and forth, we have reached a point of no contact. The pressures of school, family, and financial struggles became too much, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I expressed how awful they made me feel, and that was finally enough for them to cut ties. Despite everything that happened, I still find myself thinking about a life with them. Why? This is what I wanted and needed, so why haven't I moved on? They moved on a long time ago and caused me irreparable pain. They couldn't offer me the same comfort I tried to provide while we were together, even though they had experienced similar pain before. Am I jealous? Am I selfish? Am I a bad person? I don't have the answers, but I'm sure these feelings are temporary. I'm just upset about the emotional investment I made over the past 2 years that feels wasted now.